This is Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily with Andrew Hustler Paterson and Michael Remis.
Hey, good afternoon, folks. Welcome to another edition of Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Andrew Paterson and Michael Remis with you, and we have a packed lineup coming up today. Obviously, the big story in town, Rick Bowness being hired as the new head coach of the Winnipeg Jets. We will have Sean Reynolds, who spoke to Bones yesterday. Rennie's coming up in a few minutes, and then Murat as well, both on the Jets' moves. And we'll get some thoughts on the Jets going into Thursday's round one of the NHL draft with Murat, who I believe is already in Montreal. And then a little later on, really looking forward to this, Westy's going to jump on with us. Troy Westwood will get some thoughts on the Bombers' 23-22 victory over the Argos. What it was like seeing Andrew Harris playing against the Bombers in double blue. And, of course, Westy's takes on the Jets offseason as well. Big shout out to the sponsors that make this show happen each and every day, including our friends at Aikens Lake, Wallace & Wallace, F Apparel, Vita Health, Fresh Market, Culligan Water, Manitoba Battery, Royal Sports, Breezy Bend, Not Auto Corp, Little Brown Jug, Princess Auto, Boston Pizza, the Nick and Nicky DQ Group, Assiniboia Downs, Canadian Club Whiskey, and Coolbet Canada. We did have Monday Night Football last night. It was actually a pretty heck of a great way to start off the week. And that's the way where we're going to start the show today. And let's get Michael Remis in here and discuss another big win for the Bombers. What's going on, dude?
Another win from the Bombers. But did they win in convincing enough fashion for you? Is their 4-0 record? Is it dominating enough?
Well, it wasn't dominating enough to cover the spread last night and get me to 4-0 and cash that parlay. I will say that much. It was that was an insane game. Like when we talk, and I know Hamilton mentioned, some people say that the CFL stands for the Crazy Football League. If that was the only game that you'd seen of the CFL, you would be wondering, is it this bizarre each and every week? I mean, from the Argos' first touchdown, that ridiculous pick that the Bombers made, which included a tip drill, a lateral to another player. I tweeted out last night that Bombers are sort of like the Harlem Globetrotters of defense. And then a late comeback by the Argos, and the game ended on one of the worst extra point attempts you'll see in a long time for the highest paid kicker in the Canadian Football League. It had a little bit of everything, Reem, but the one thing that we've become used to talking about is the Bombers finding a way to win, and they did it again, and they are 4-0 in the CFL.
Yeah, you can't argue with their record. They just, we used to say that they would find a way to lose, but, when you need a big play from the defense in the fourth quarter, it's there. If your offense is sputtering, it seems like the defense can chip in with the score on their own. That was, I guess, great acrobatics by Adam Bighill to start off that play, and then you had the lateral on the interception. Pretty incredible. So, I thought the Bombers would win, but I definitely thought it would be a bit tougher. The Argos did give them their loss last season, and Andrew Harris revenge game narrative. I don't think we had enough time to talk about that. I mean, this guy looked vintage with 111 yards on 22 carries, averaged 5 yards a carry. But Mark Leggio came in, made some kicks, 3 for 3 of field goals. That's been a question. The long was only 32, but hey, made the kicks. That's what you want. So
that was the difference. You just asked the guys on the Argos side.
So again, great entertainment, and you were kind of wondering who was going to step up without Nick Dembski. Dalton Schoen with 5 catches, 73 yards. Greg Ellingson got banged up. He had 3 catches for 50. It was Wolotarski who had the touchdown. So a lot of different contributors. I think there's definitely some questions about the Bombers. I do think they're still number 1 on my power rankings. Well, I know you and Westy are going to get into this about the running backs. I mean, Andrew Harris, big revenge game.
Well, every game is a revenge game for Andrew Harris, it seems. I mean, this guy is such an outlier. I mean, running backs are not supposed to be doing what he's doing, never mind at his age, after 30. He's just about, I don't know whether he passed this last night, past Milt Stiegel, or will do it in the next game. But he's just about up to 4th all time in total yards from scrimmage in CFL history. But man, Reem, I mean, what a difference. I mean, you looked at the Bomber running attack last night and the Argo running attack, and that's, considering the two offensive lines. I mean, it just goes to show how much gas Andrew Harris has left in the tank. And it maybe wouldn't be as big of a topic here if the Bombers running game was getting the job done, but with just 60 total yards for the team last night, I mean, that has been a real sore spot so far. And listen, I know there's a lot of pressure on Brady Oliveira to get things going. He had 7 carries last night, an average of 4. A number of times not able to move the chains. And, that ended up bringing Mark Leggio out to punt right now. So I don't know. My big takeaway last night, and maybe this was, a little romanticizing, what Andrew Harris meant, but my God, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers miss Andrew Harris. I mean, if Andrew Harris was wearing blue and gold last night, I think the Bombers win that game comfortably by 2 touchdowns. It wasn't that case, and it was the Toronto Argonaut offense that certainly, got the better of the Bombers in most of the yardage. But when it comes down to it, it's turnovers that'll kill you, and there is no more sticky-fingered group than the Bomber secondary. And great to see Winston Rose really set the tone with that pick 6 early in the game.
Yeah, and he got, burned in week 1. We were talking about him. And so, yeah, I agree with you. And you look at the turnovers, McLeod Bethel-Thompson, 2 interceptions. Zach Caleros, he had that 1 pick in the end zone. I feel like he I don't want to say often, but when he throws interceptions, it's, when the Bombers are trying to score, and sometimes, he throws it in the end zone and it gets picked off. I don't have any numbers, but just from watching games, is that a reoccurring theme with him, or am I off base?
Well, I mean, listen, he hasn't made that many mistakes, so I mean, a few do stand out. I mean,
for the record, I don't think what's his record? Like, he's 1 loss as a starter.
He's lost 1 game in 3 years for the Bombers.
Yeah, the Bombers. So I mean, we're really nitpicking here, but at the same time, you're trying to get points. You can't throw interceptions in the end zone.
Well, here's the thing, and I think he would, certainly would love to have that back because, the Bombers on that play, one of the receivers, I can't remember who it was offside by 5 yards. I mean, the flag had gone up. I mean, it was essentially an unnecessary risk because even if it was completed, it was going to be coming back. So, that was unfortunate for the Bombers. I mean, obviously the 3 points would have helped them in the second half. But once again, it was sort of that bend but no break. We've talked about it for so many times. But once again, Argos would get down into the red zone, and the Bombers made big plays up until late in the game when, of course, the Toronto Argonauts were able to get it over the goal line in for 6. And what we thought was going to be a simple convert and sending this game to overtime ended up with the win. And I know we're going to talk to this with Westy a little bit later on, but have you seen the standings, Rebo? I mean, the last place team in the West, the Edmonton Elks, were tied with the first place teams in the East with 1 win so far this season. And Saskatchewan, that's 3-1. Is in 4th place in the West. This has been a common theme over a number of years. I actually thought that this would have been a year that we maybe got away from that and there'd be a little bit more parity. Well, anyone that was expecting that, I think, is sorely mistaken. It is all about the West right now. And, the Argos, despite being 1-2, are tied for first with Montreal.
Yeah, it's kind of too bad the way that it's worked out. Farhan Lalji had a really good tweet where you look at some of these losses here. So this is Farhan pointing it out, and we're going to look at the standings, and yeah, I think it looks pretty bad, but I don't think Ottawa is as bad as their record. I think they're pretty good. They've just played the top 2 teams, but here's Farhan's tweet. So after 4 weeks, the East-West record, West leads 11-1. However, 7 West wins were 1-score game. One of them was overtime. And the Hamilton losses were 9 and 6-point games going into the 4th. And Als led Saskatchewan at halftime. So 1 game was a total blowout, BC Toronto. So Farhan thinks it's closer. I don't know if it just seems like the West teams just find a way to win. Like the Bombers have against the two Ottawa games and this game. So I don't think it's that far off as the standings would indicate, but can't really argue that how silly it looks when you see the last place team in the West with one win would be first in the East.
Now, this is all setting up for a monster game earlier in the season on Saturday night. Bombers heading out to BC to take on the undefeated Lions. Young phenom quarterback Nathan Rourke getting it done. But we'll have some time to get to that later on in the week. There was a couple of other incidents, Remo, that, we mentioned that wild pick that the Bombers had. Toronto also got on the board with one of the most bizarre touchdowns I think I've ever seen. And I joke with the guys, it literally was taking an act of God for the Bombers to give up a touchdown. Now, of course, they did a little bit more than that in the second half. But I don't know where you were on this one. We went back and forth over and over watching all the replays. I actually do think that they got it right. I don't think that the Bomber D-back had possession of it. But how that didn't either hit the ground or was incomplete, I'll never understand. I mean, truly a 1 in a million touchdown in the game last night.
Yeah, I saw the Houston goes up for the pick. Looks like he has it. Brandon Banks gets his hands in there. Now, I don't know if he had complete control. The ball was rolling around before he hit the ground, and then as they hit the ground, it pops out. Banks has it for a touchdown. I watched it over and over in the replay. There was the one angle where you could see. Now, I thought, okay, I can see why this would be a touchdown. And then I go on Twitter, and I realize that I'm in the complete minority, where every single person, every media person seemed to think it was an interception. I just don't know. I mean, the way it was, so they called it a touchdown on the field, so it's going to be tough to overturn. I think it was hard to say that he had complete control of the ball when he hit the ground. So I was okay with it being a touchdown, although I see that I'm maybe the only person who thinks that, and people think the ground caused it. I don't know. Maybe Banks' hand was in there and loosened it up on the way to the ground. So I was okay with it being a touchdown again, but I appear to be in the minority.
Yeah, it was just so bizarre. And I mean, I think you make a great point. The fact that it was called a touchdown on the field. I mean, you needed to have clear, conclusive evidence that, it was the other way for them to overturn it. And I don't think that it was there. But I don't know. I mean, there's some people that thought the ball hit the ground. I thought the ball was very close to hitting the ground, but it never did. And I don't know. I mean, I never saw Houston with full, clear control being down. I mean, the ball seemed to still be going, and that's why it ended up being a TD. But certainly, and you're exactly right, I think that was as a controversial a play that we've seen in a long time. And hey, well, maybe the Argos got a break early in the game, but they didn't get a break when from the football gods at the end of the game. And listen, you know what? You turn the football over 5 times, you don't deserve to win. And I think, when the Argos and Dinwiddie go back and check out what happened with them last night, they'll look to their inability to take care of the football. And that's what good football teams do. And that's why the Bombers are 4-0. They're certainly not blowing anybody out. But when you are able to dominate defensively and get those huge field-changing plays, especially something like a pick six from Rose last night, you'll win your fair share of games right now. And, Zach Collaros didn't need to, look like, the best quarterback in the league last night. They needed to take care of the football. They did that for the most part, with the exception of that one pick that, we talked about earlier. And that is the bread and butter of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers and the reason why they are still the team to beat going into this monster matchup on Saturday night against BC.
Yeah, we can get into what matchup. We'll just get it. I was going to say something else, but you know what? You just hit the nail right on the head with everything you said there. I was going to say that, maybe the Bombers, as it is early, it's, beginning of the season, and maybe the offense will be clicking more as it goes on. I mean, you have so many new phases here. They didn't have Dembski, as we talked about, Andrew Harris, Kenny Lawler gone. So I liked what Dalton Schoen has done early on. We talked about him in training camp, so we'll see how the Bombers offense gels as the season goes on. But this game on Saturday, how concerned are you? Okay, Monday, Eastern time zone, and then you go home, and now you have to go to the West time zone for Saturday's game. That's like a couple different time zones, Huss.
We banned time zone zone conversation during the Maurice era. Are we bringing it back off suspension to talk about this game? Look,
I thought yesterday's game was going to be like a letdown game, a look-ahead game where you're favored quite a bit against Toronto. You come in and you're not at your best. I think this is a real challenger. I'm curious to see how Nathan Rourke goes against a real defense. Like, I don't think BC's putting up 50 points again. But I think the Bombers definitely behind the 8 ball here, having played with the short week. Plus, I mean, if it was a home game, they'll be okay. But you have to go to BC, and it's an afternoon game as well. So you're playing even shorter week.
Well, and I mean, like, listen, they're going to be off today. They'll get some treatment. I mean, they might have it one day of practice, and then a travel day slash walkthrough, and then going at it on Saturday. Certainly, when you look at the schedule, this might be the toughest spot game for the Bombers all year. And we've kind of taken a look at some other teams that have been in those situations, and it hasn't been kind to them. That being said, I think the emergence of BC and the way that they played so far and the buzz that they've generated, I think there's less likely you'll have a letdown from the Bombers in this game, just because, frankly, they're so consistent with what they've been doing. But I think they'll be looking forward to trying to make a statement and remind everyone that they're still the man, if you will, and Nate Rourke and the rest of the BC line still have ways to go. Although I will say this, and we'll get to the Coolbet lines a little later on, I can't remember the last time the Bombers were an underdog in a football game.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't recall, but BC's definitely earned it. They're at home. I mean, you look at the quarterback rating. I saw, was it Darren who tweeted this out? Like, you got a bunch of guys in their QB efficiency rating. Here it is. What do you got? Fajardo 97, Caleros 97, Bo Levi 96, Nathan Rourke 135. I mean, he's been absolutely insane. 83% passing completion, 9 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. They've just beat up on these teams. So, but look, they played who they play. Ottawa, Toronto, I think is better than they went toe to toe with. Toronto, Edmonton. They're not playing anyone that great. So we'll see how the Bombers defense goes. And I think it'll be a big challenge. I'm looking forward to seeing it. I usually would just lock Nathan Rourke in fantasy, but I have a hard time wanting to play him against the Bombers defense.
Well, he's going to probably have about 90% ownership in some of those DFS contests right now, the way that he's playing right now, between the passing, the running yards, I mean, the points they've been putting up. But this will be the test for the British Columbia Lions. We'll talk more about it throughout the week as we get closer to Saturday and the Bombers' big game. We're going to have Sean Reynolds jump on in just a second here on the show. Before we do that, big shout out to our friends at Aikens Lake. We're going to get out to Aikens Lake Wilderness Lodge in early August. Cannot wait for it. And man, we've been seeing some absolute monster fish being pulled out of the lake lately over on their social feeds at Aikens Lake. If you're thinking about maybe planning either a family trip or a long-awaited corporate getaway, Aikens is the spot. You can be on the water in less than 2 hours from the city of Winnipeg. Find out more at aikenslake.com or hit up our pal Pitt Terren on Twitter for more information at Aikens Lake. Mention our friends at Wallace & Wallace have a lot going on right now. We often talked about their fencing, their overhead doors for your garage, and I know they were there taking care of Remis, who had a garage door issue. But they also install and service boathouse doors. In fact, if you're ripping around the lake and one of the boathouse doors catches your eye, chances are it's one of theirs. They've got steel or aluminum doors, polycarbonate or glass panels, and a design that's perfect for your little piece of paradise. And hey, if you're thinking about your boathouse door could use some TLC now that the high water's receiving, you can give them a call to arrange a service visit at 452-2700. You can also hit them up at wallacedoors.com or check out their showroom on Lawson Road. And hey, speaking of the showroom, if you've got a tennis ball hanging in your garage to keep your bumper from bumping, we got a special offer just for Winnipeg Sports Talk listeners. The first 50 people to swing by 90 Lawson Road will receive a free LiftMaster laser garage parking assist. Just pop down, ask for Haley or one of the gang, and tell them Huss and Remo sent you from Winnipeg Sports Talk. Wallace & Wallace, 90 Lawson Road, and online at wallacedoors.com. Gang's looking good. Speaking of F apparel, I mean, Ken and Ren were... they look like models there at the Cup final. Now, I got a little bit more work with the big news about Rick Bowness. We'll talk to them, but certainly most of the guys in the media, many of them popping over to F Apparel to get their custom suits starting at just $400, and much more than suits as well. Chinos, golf pants, accessories, and more. Check them out. 190 Smith Street downtown and online at F Apparel. And hey, with barbecue season here right now, parties, Vita Health Fresh Market has you covered. Listen, they're already stocked with Winnipeg's best selection of local, organic, and natural grocery supplements and beauty products. Also got a great selection of non-alcoholic drinks if you're entertaining and want to make sure you've got some non-alcoholic options. And man, bison burgers, bison steaks, lean chicken, and more. Some great healthy options for the barbecue as well. Pop down and see them at one of 7 Winnipeg locations, including the newest store in Linden Ridge. And also check them out online at myvita.ca with their fully shoppable website. All right, we have a lot to get to on the Jets. We got a new head coach who joined our next guest yesterday afternoon. And of course, he's back now from the Cup final and getting ready for draft week. Sean Reynolds joins us now. Ren, what's up? What's happening?
Nothing. How are you doing, Huss?
I'm doing well. My head's still spinning from the last couple of weeks following the ups and downs of the Winnipeg Jets. It started off with striking out on Barry Trotz. And let me ask you, I mean, you're obviously following this very closely. You've been talking to people throughout the Cup final as to what's happening in Winnipeg. What did you think when you heard that Rick Bowness was the guy last Friday?
Well, I was a little surprised because I kind of forgot about him, right? And I feel how did I forget about him? Because when he came loose, I thought, boy, oh boy, that would be a real fit if Barry Trotz doesn't end up here. Now, I think we all just got so involved and so caught up in the Barry Trotz thing that we didn't think about it that much. And then it started to kind of seem the way that Bowness stepped away from Dallas, and his future was a little unsure. And it was like, well, maybe I will, maybe I won't. And now I wasn't surprised yesterday to hear him say that he turned down a number of coaching opportunities that weren't head coaching opportunities. But I just think that this is, when it happened, I thought, okay, all right, this makes a ton of sense. And I mean, I know a lot of people are thinking that this is going to have something to do with, the fact that he was a Winnipeg Jet. He spent time as a coach of a Winnipeg Jet. And clearly, the way that a guy like Scott Arniel comes back and a way that a guy like Pascal Vincent, what his voice was, or his name was in with the candidates. Clearly, True North likes to have Winnipeg connections, and they like to go back to people that they've had, past connections with, and they like to keep those connections strong. Heisinger ends up part of the organization and remains for a really long time. But I mean, I don't see it as being that. I honestly, and I tweeted about this, and I'm actually surprised how many people are upset about this move. I mean, this, first off, is a plan B. Like, both of them admitted to it. Chevy talked about it yesterday. We all knew it. It was out in the media. Rick Bowness talked about it. This is a plan B. And if I told you that the Jets were going to have to go and hit plan B, and their plan B was going to include a guy who'd taken his team to the Stanley Cup within the last 3 years, who had outdueled Jared Bednar and the Colorado Avalanche in the process, who had outdueled Pete DeBoer and the Vegas Golden Knights in the process, 2 superior rosters, and almost eliminated the Jack Adams winning coach this last season in the playoffs with a far superior roster. Without naming who it is, I think people would be ecstatic. I think that would be ecstatic. They'd be ecstatic if that was plan A. I just think this is one of these things where Barry Trotz, they were shooting for the stars as high as you could possibly go. That didn't happen, but no one got him. And I think anyone who came afterwards was going to feel a little bit sullied in fans' eyes. They shouldn't feel this way. This is a phenomenal coach who I think, and we can get to that as we talk here, but I think he kind of comes here with the ability to fix the biggest issues that happen, that this Winnipeg Jets team have. And I think that's off ice.
There's no doubt about that. And, we'll talk about some of those moves that could change things. But it's just as far as the hire goes. What did you think about the 2-year deal? Listen, when I heard it the first time, I think like many people, the first thing that we thought was maybe Rick Bowness in some ways is somewhat of a placeholder, and the team is still holding out hope that Barry Trotz is going to do what he's got to do and come back to coaching, and it might be here. That was my first reaction on the weekend. I certainly don't really feel that way after watching the press conference yesterday. I mean, what did you make about, where Rick is in his career and the term that the Winnipeg Jets have at least set out to begin this marriage with Bowness as the head coach?
Well, first, that was my first thought as well, and I don't rule that out. Rick Bowness is 67 years old. I think that I think what you see is a man who's got a true passion for hockey, loves the game, and wants to, as long as he wants to stay part of the game, he's going to stay part of the game. But I think he's leaving his options open. I mean, a 2-year deal tells me maybe 2 years from now he'll think I may want to spend more time with my family, or maybe I don't want all the responsibilities of being a head coach. And this is a guy who said it yesterday. He doesn't, put a lot of stock in the idea that I'm a head coach or an assistant coach or an associate coach. He's kind of okay just coaching. And I think he's shown in the past that he does enough and gets enough out of his players as an assistant coach that there's probably a lot of, feeling of quality of life that comes out of playing that role if he has to roll into that. So, I mean, if Barry Trotz came back next year, said that he wanted to coach, and the Winnipeg Jets had a conversation with Rick Bowness and said, look, I think Barry Trotz wants to come back and coach, and I think he'd like to lock this down for 5 years. I know we've got you under contract for 1 more year, but if we were interested in going down that road and locking up something a little bit more long-term, can we have a conversation first to see if you want to do this that long? And if you don't, are you okay with us working on the option of trying to lock down someone for a longer term kind of idea, which we know the Jets love, right? Like they wanted Paul Maurice. I still think that they, wouldn't have moved on from Paul Maurice if he wouldn't have moved on himself. This is a team that likes stability. They like long-term hires. Like I said, Heisinger is proof of that. Kevin Cheveldayoff is proof of that. Paul Maurice was proof of that. So to have a coach for just 2 years, I think speaks to more to Rick Bowness's situation, and that he is not certain that he wants to be locked down for 4 or 5, 6 years, as much as he wants to just be in a place where he can coach, he can have an effect, and see where that takes him 2 years from now.
Yeah, and you make a great point, because Ren, when at the beginning of this process, when Bowness stepped down from Dallas and was mentioned as a potential guy in Winnipeg, no one was really talking about the head coaching job. It was that he would be a great associate or assistant coach, and has a great relationship with Barry Trotz, and wouldn't that be a great combination of two guys to come in,
staff,
as well as maybe a younger person to come in for that. So I wouldn't rule out that that's actually been discussed. The one thing that I'll say, I did see an interview with Bobcat and John Shannon talking with Barry Trotz yesterday, and I certainly got the feeling that Barry Trotz might be back coaching sooner as opposed to later, and that could be at some point this season. Now, I kind of have a hard time imagining the Jets going this route with Bowness, and then as soon as Barry Trotz is good to go, I mean, having him come in mid-season, and that might mean that there's an opportunity ahead of it. But I'm sure it's something that's been discussed. And I mean, your colleague Elliot Friedman discussing just how, I can't remember what the way he described it, but things got a little crazy in Winnipeg when they got the no from Barry Trotz and where they went from that. It would have been fascinating to be behind the scenes and hear what those conversations were like, because we knew that they had put so much into Barry Trotz, and I think that's what everyone expected and wanted them to do. I didn't know, no one's going to give the Jets a hard time for moving on from Barry Trotz too quickly, but it does set up the conversation that'll probably never go away until he's back coaching somewhere in the National Hockey League.
Yeah, and I think the one thing about the Barry Trotz situation is I feel like, and I don't know how you feel about this, Huss, but it feels like the way this shook down is that a whole bunch of teams took a run at Barry Trotz, and then they fell by the wayside, and the Jets were the last team standing. And so I think the feeling that comes from Jets fans is that Barry Trotz basically said, no thanks, no thanks, no thanks, no thanks, no thanks to everybody, and then got to the Jets and was like, I don't know, I really want to do this, and then was like, you know what, I'm going to take a year off. I'm not certain that that's the truth. I mean, from what I was hearing when I was down, covering the Stanley Cup final in a lot of different places, what may just have happened was I think Barry Trotz went into this and very upfront with everybody said right off the bat, I don't think I'm going to coach next year. And every team said, well, until you make up your mind, here's our pitch. And I think Barry Trotz listened to all those different pitches and said, I appreciate the pitch, but I still don't think I'm going to coach this year. And I think what happened is most of the other teams said, okay, we're going to move on. Thanks for your time. I just think that the Jets didn't move on. I think that the Jets held on to every possible chance that Barry Trotz may just say, okay, I'm going to come back, and that's why they may be the last team standing. So I guess the caution that I would put with all this is when Barry Trotz does come back, I think people are left with the impression that the Jets were the last team standing, so they would be the first team to be revisited by Barry Trotz when he came back. I don't necessarily know that that's 100% truthful, and that there wouldn't be other options that he would be looking for, or other fits that he would think were maybe a better fit than that. So I would say that there should be caution with people when they talk about Barry Trotz, thinking that when he does come back, things are going to pick up right where they left off, and the first option is going to be the winner.
Hey, great to see so many people out this afternoon watching us live on YouTube. If you haven't already, folks, make sure you hit that red subscribe button and give a thumbs up to the episode. Always helps us spread the channel. And of course, you can check out Kenny and Rennie as well and give them a sub. And go back to check out their conversation with the new head coach yesterday afternoon. We're looking forward to having Bowness on probably next week after the draft, heading into free agency. But what do you think? How did you enjoy the conversation? I'm really impressed with his energy, the positivity. I think that is something that I think will bode well for a team that probably needs some of that, considering what we saw last year. But what did you make of your time talking with the new coach?
I mean, I've spoken with him before in covering him down south. I've spoken with players who talk about him, who have been coached by him. This is a guy everybody loves. But what stands out to me, Huss, more than anything, is he talked about it quite a bit yesterday. This is a guy who holds people accountable, and quite often those two things don't go together. That coach that is always on you and, preaching accountability. You think of a guy like Ken Hitchcock, right, who is always hammering home accountability, and that can create a lot of problems with your players, right? It's hard to have someone come up to you and say, you know what, you're not good enough. You need to be better. You're not doing enough. Pointing out all the warts in your game, pointing out your lack of effort on nights where in an 82 season grind, sometimes you think you deserve nights off or whatever. The thing that blows me away about Rick Bowness is the one thing I've heard time and time again with him is he demands accountability, and you are not going to get away with not being accountable when you play for Rick Bowness. And yet, listen, Huss, I don't know if you heard that thing that was on the internet about Tyler Seguin talking about Rick Bowness, and you could hear the ache in him that he'd left and that he'd lost that coach. And you can imagine a player like Tyler Seguin would have been held accountable and would have had, both barrels turned on him by Rick Bowness on a number of occasions, and still feels that way about this coach. I think, and this is what I was alluding to when we first started talking. I think when he talked yesterday and said, when Paul Friesen asked him a great question about how he handles star players who aren't being accountable, he said, if you're not being accountable, you're going to hear about it from me. I'm going to tell you what you need to do. And if you don't do it, then your ice time is going to get cut back. That's the way it's going to be. If you're an offensive player who loves to score, you're not going to have as many opportunities to score, because I'm not going to put you on the ice to score. I just think that every Jets fan heard that and thought, well, that's not what's been happening around here the last, 5, 6, 7 years, right? It's pretty obvious that hasn't been happening in Winnipeg. So when we talk about what needs fixing most in Winnipeg, I still think there needs to be roster tinkering. I think the people who think that Rick Bowness is walking in and taking this team to the Stanley Cup final needs to take a look at the two teams that just played in the Stanley Cup final, look at their rosters, and give your head a little bit of a shake. There's more that needs to be done here. But I do think Rick Bowness can get the most out of this roster as it exists. And I do think that Rick Bowness can bring an accountability to this Jets team and this Jets locker room that it sure looks like, from the conversations that the players were having in the media out loud, it sure looks like that accountability has been missed.
Well, there's no doubt about it. And I think that was music to any fan's ears. And I'll be honest, I think the majority of the players in that locker room wanted to hear that as well. The question from Freezer, we all knew who he was talking about. I mean, it was Mark Scheifele. And that situation's very interesting, considering, we heard guys like Drager earlier this summer saying he doesn't see a scenario where Scheifele is back. It sounds like it's done a 180 right now. And I mean, certainly some of that could be very much tied into the uncertainty of Pierre-Luc Dubois' long-term future here in Winnipeg. Yeah. But I do wonder, Scheifele's situation coming back to the team with a brand new head coach and potentially with a new captain if Blake Wheeler moves on.
Yeah, I mean, here's the deal, and I think that Rick Bowness is. I don't think he's a guy who ever blows smoke. I think everything that he says, he's confident enough in himself to point out the problems that exist, because he knows he's going to work on those problems, and he has confidence over the course of his career that when he goes to work on problems, he fixes problems. So I don't think he's blowing smoke when he says this. And he talked about Mark Scheifele, and the reason that he believes that they can do well and turn things around in Winnipeg is because at the heart of it, Mark Scheifele wants to succeed and he wants to win. And that's the carrot that Rick Bowness is going to dangle here. He's going to walk in, he's going to say, remember how much it sucked last year to miss the playoffs and to kind of be lost, and to, you know, all these conversations that you guys had in the media and talked about, like, you need more accountability and it's never too early to work on your room. We're going to put all that behind us. We're going to get this room harmonious, and we're going to work towards something. And we're going to be better, and we're going to take the biggest stab that we can at winning. And I don't think that that's a hard sell for players. Now, the hard sell may come when in the execution of getting there, you need to give me more in this area. And if you're not giving me more, well, sorry, that's the end of the bench. You're going to have to sit there for a while. I mean, I'm not saying that there's going to be bumps and bruises and bruised egos along the way here. I fully expect that there will be. But I do think that it's a scenario under which if someone is going to reach these players while they are in Winnipeg, I don't know that you could have gone out and got a better hire. I mean, that's the interesting part about this high side. Take a look at all the guys who got, who moved and got different jobs around. And I don't know how many of them I would put higher on the list as tackling the exact issue that the Winnipeg Jets have. I mean, if you would have brought in John Tortorella, who we all heard interviewed with the team here, and who I heard kind of came in and gave it a little bit to the, it was almost like it was the reverse. It was almost like the Jets were the ones being interviewed and got a bit of a dressing down from what I heard, which is hilarious, but it kind of matches with Chevy saying like, boy, oh boy, there's a guy who walks in and like leaves an impression on a room. But I mean, if he came in, it was going to be a my way or the highway kind of situation. And we already saw how Laine responded to that. We've seen how Pierre-Luc Dubois responded to that in the past. I mean, his way of doing things is a my way or the highway. You're getting on board, or you're not getting much from me. And it rubs people the wrong way, and sometimes it ends up in people moving out of town. I think Rick Bowness, if you see where he's gone, there's not a lot of situations in which Rick Bowness goes somewhere and tries to turn a room around and ends up pushing guys out of that room. He's able to keep guys within that room and work within that room to elevate things. And I think that that's what the Jets want. And I know, Huss, we're talking about, the potential for Wheeler to be moved. But at the heart of it, I still think that Kevin Cheveldayoff believes in the group that he's put together. And he would feel so much redemption if a coach came in and got this roster to show what it's capable of. Because it would just, everyone wants to feel as though their work has been affirmed. And I feel like Cheveldayoff would feel his work was affirmed if he kept this for the most part, kept this core and had a coach come in and get them working.
Well, I'll say one thing for Scheifele. At least he took the call and answered the phone. I had to laugh. I mean, that was the one. I mean, it was like a 10-second soundbite. But I mean, Judy Owen asking if he talked to the captain, Blake Wheeler. And he says, oh, yeah, I called him, left a message, got a text back, and I'll be talking to him at some point. Yeah. That was more than anything we've heard about trade rumors or Frank Saravelli putting Wheeler on his trade bait list. That to me said that, okay, maybe this a divorce, if you will, from the longtime captain is in the mix. So what do you make of that? And what do you think a trade for Blake Wheeler looks like? Because of course there's the age, there's the contract, more impactful than anything. He's still been a productive player. But there's not a lot of teams that can just seamlessly add $8.5 million to the books.
Yeah, it's weird. It is weird, and we should probably couch this by saying, I've been in situations before where there's been like really important phone calls that I need to take, and I haven't been able to take them because I've got the kids or something is going on. So I think we should all just like give a little bit of space. We didn't find out how long ago Rick Bowness's efforts to reach out to Blake Wheeler were. So I think that we should reserve judgment, but at the same time, it sure does sound strange. I mean, as the captain of the Winnipeg Jets, you would think it would be, high up on his list of responsibilities as for his work, which pays him really, really well. As the captain, answering that phone call sounds like one of your duties, right? Getting to that phone call as quick as you can sounds like one of your duties as a captain and a high-paid employee of an organization. If there's no excuse for him not getting to the phone, then yeah, that's red flags popping up left, right, and center. That's a forest of red flags all popping up at the same time. But as far as a trade, I mean, I don't know. I've seen some lists come out. So one of them had the Montreal Canadiens on it. I couldn't believe that. I mean, this is a team that looks to be trying to shed money and get, rid of, rebuild and start young. So I don't even know how he ends up on that list unless someone knows something that I don't know. I know that a lot of people have been jumping to me right away saying, do you think Paul Maurice is going to be, trying to bring him in there? And I just think, well, my goodness, this is a team that already has a big contract in Sergei Bobrovsky that they'd probably love to get rid of. I don't know how much the Jets would keep it. I couldn't see them wanting to bring him in. I mean, this is a room that Paul Maurice essentially left, right? Like he left this room. He said he thought they needed a new voice. It sounds like there was a little bit of burnout, but that burnout lasted as long as it took for him to get a really good opportunity, which he jumped on right away as soon as he had that opportunity. I cannot see a world in which he would be reaching out and saying, let's grab the captain from the room that I needed to leave because no one was listening to me anymore, and bring that captain into this team here. That doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, I see it as being a situation in which the Jets are going to have to, they could maybe get something back if they swallowed a bunch of the salary. If they don't want to swallow a bunch of the salary, they're going to have to give, a player like, in my estimation, a player like Ville Heinola or someone like that. You're going to have to pay someone in assets to take on that contract. Because as good as Blake Wheeler is, there's 2 years left on that contract. It's a lot of money. I would suggest there's not a lot of players around the league, teams around the league, who look at that contract and say Blake Wheeler is fully fulfilling an $8.25 million contract, especially when you compare him to the players around the league who would be making that kind of money. So I don't see a lot of, in my opinion, I don't see a ton of suitors. I think you've got a limited amount of teams to work with, teams that are basically going to be taking on that money for assets. So you better start taking a look at the assets that you're willing to get rid of if that's the case. But again, to finish where we started, if Blake Wheeler is not taking that phone call because this is the kind of where this situation is at, that's an untenuous situation, and you better start taking stock of those assets, because you can't have that sitting around the room if that's the situation as well.
No, for sure. And I think everyone realized that there needed to be some sort of change, presumably to that leadership core. Many people thought that it would be Mark Scheifele. If that's not happening, I think all signs point to potentially Wheeler moving on. But I mean, with you, and I don't think for a second the Jets would be willing to give up a Ville Heinola to get Blake Wheeler off the books. I mean, listen, there might be some addition by subtraction when it comes to the locker room and enabling some of the young players to truly become those leaders that, they seem to have been ready for. But I also, for a team that has drafted and developed the way that, their mantra is, I have a hard time seeing them punting on Ville Heinola before he's been given a legitimate shot to be an everyday player in the National Hockey League. And that's why I think if Wheeler is traded, it's probably far more likely that they hold their nose and eat a significant portion of the salary and try and get back, whether it's some picks, something else for them, and they'll eat it on the salary side of things, not on the asset side of things.
Yeah, and you know what? One thought just did occur to me. I mean, the kind of question mark in all of this is Pierre-Luc Dubois, and if there's going to be some kind of move made. Now, the Montreal thing would maybe make sense, if they had the room to fit both those players. If you can get Pierre-Luc Dubois now, and the cost for doing that, if because I think that we all think that Pierre-Luc Dubois, Montreal is sniffing around him and would be interested in having him. If you can get him and sign him long term, and that's the future that you get, if the cost for that is taking on another contract of a player who still is producing offensively, and only has 2 years more on the books for you to deal with, I could see a potential scenario by which that would happen, especially after they've moved Shea Weber's money off the books the way that they have. So I'm revisiting it. That kind of popped into my head as you were talking, but yeah, I can see that.
Listen, I know that the management and everyone's on their way to Montreal. You've got the general managers meetings tomorrow. The first round of the draft is Thursday night. This is traditionally the time when deals get made. How many players from last year's team do you think might be no longer property of the Jets once we get to next week?
I wouldn't be surprised if RFAs like UFAs like Sanford walk. I do think the Jets need to put some work into their bottom six. I could see them doing something like that. I could see them making room on the back end. But I've always been one to say this, and I've said this, and I'm probably going to get burnt because most people are saying something else. But I've said since the beginning, I didn't think Scheifele was going anywhere, and I do think that the Jets fielded some phone calls or had some conversations about Mark Scheifele, and I just don't think you can get back what you need from Mark Scheifele without punting on your present and saying, well, give us a bunch of futures, or B, trying to win that trade through volume, because I don't think anyone is looking and saying, okay, like St. Louis isn't looking and saying, okay, we'll give you Ryan O'Reilly and you give us Mark Scheifele. That's not what's happening. The teams aren't out there looking. So I think that becomes a hard trade to make. So I think the issues that we've been talking about are right at the core for the Winnipeg Jets, the Pierre-Luc Dubois, the Mark Scheifeles, the Blake Wheelers, and those core pieces are hard to move, whether it's money that's an issue or whether it's getting a full return that keeps your team happy and competitive right now. That can be problematic and that can be troublesome. So I don't personally see major roster construction unless they can get someone to take on Blake Wheeler's contract. And the tricky part for them with Pierre-Luc Dubois is Pierre-Luc Dubois has got time. I mean, he's going to get paid this year regardless based on, his arbitration rights. He's going to get a good contract that I don't think is going to be that far below what he'd get on the open market. So he can wait and be patient, and the team that thinks they're going to get him in unrestricted free agency can wait and be patient as well, especially if it's a team like the Montreal Canadiens who aren't in win now mode. So I think it makes it hard to move Pierre-Luc Dubois and get something back. And let's not forget for a second, every fan out there knows who was traded to get Pierre-Luc Dubois. So the end result of whatever the Pierre-Luc Dubois trade is going to be will be you traded Patrik Laine and everything that he did while he was in Winnipeg for that, and people aren't going to forget that. So that's a sensitive trade to try and make. So it's a long way of me saying I don't think the moves that the Jets are going to have to make are easy to make, and I think it's tempting to come back with a lot of what you had last year and take a look and see what Rick Bowness is able to do with that.
No, you make a great point, Sean. And I mean, I remember saying at the time of the deal, and listen, I mean, I still hate the fact that Laine got traded and whatever. I mean, that's a whole nother discussion of how they got there and, whether they traded the wrong guy. But the bottom line is when they traded Patrik Laine for the return, I think I said a number of times on this show, this will be an unmitigated disaster if they don't get this player to commit long-term to Winnipeg. Now, maybe that's a little harsh because, again, you can like if they make a killer deal for the guy and it helps the team long-term, I guess it could be salvageable. But to most people following the team, you trade Patrik Laine for a guy that wants to leave town at his first possible exit. That's terrible for the Winnipeg Jets. And maybe more so for all the things that people will give the GM a hard time about, that will stand above everything else.
Well, and here's the interesting thing. This is the one thing that I always, when Patrik Laine was sent out of town, you almost felt from Kevin Cheveldayoff and from Maurice and Blake Wheeler, there was almost a bit, and maybe I'm reading into this too much, but it almost felt like there was a bit of a good riddance kind of feeling with them. And I never understood that because this was a guy who wanted to stay in Winnipeg long-term, right? And I think that this, to me, Huss, is the most interesting part about this. If Rick Bowness goes into this room and is able to kind of correct this room and fix the things that have been festering in that room for a really long time, the one thought in my mind is going to be, what if that move was made? What if Rick Bowness had taken over this room back when Patrik Laine was still here? And what if you fix that issue before it festered to the point that you needed to move him out of town? Because, your point is sound. I mean, Pierre-Luc Dubois wants to leave town, or at this moment says essentially has said he wants to leave town at the first possible opportunity. Patrick Laine was here scoring goals, delighting the fans, being his unique, quirky self, which I think, caused some problems. But at the same time, maybe you got to embrace what the player is. But the fact that he wanted to be here long-term and could have had a long-term career in Winnipeg, scoring the goals and having that shot that we got to watch night after night after night, if you had the coach in place who is able to bridge whatever gaps existed in that locker room, boy, oh boy, that's a hard pill to swallow.
You know what? It's a great point. I mean, if we're having this conversation about a new head coach coming in at the end of the 2019 season, before everything went sideways, and we all know what happened in 2020, I think you're exactly right. I think things will be significantly different. Hey, just back before we finish up, I mean, we spent a lot of time talking about the big pieces forward-wise. Do you think a defenseman will get moved over the course of this week? I mean, I would think that they have to move at least one of the veterans at some point if you're planning on having Dylan Samberg and Ville Heinola get a shot this season.
Yeah, they can't keep sitting on the assets that they have. So, I mean, you know what? I know a lot of people, and you're right, it's a draft and develop team, so they're not the kind of team that likes to move draft picks out. But I'll say this, like, if you're not going to use the draft picks you have and you're just going to sit them and not sit them, but have them play in the AHL, then move them for what you need at the NHL level and have confidence that you'll keep drafting behind them and kind of filling the cupboards up behind them. But to your point, I mean, if the Jets want to see those players in Jets jerseys, they need to start clearing the deck for them. So I could see exactly that happening. We heard news of a number of players, afterwards, some players on that Jets back end who had said they'd be okay with the trade around the trade deadline. Didn't happen because the team still wanted to take a stab at the playoffs, which, I mean, think what you will of that. I thought it was a mistake at the time, but it's the decision they made. But yeah, I mean, you need to start clearing the deck and moving players onto that back end and giving them a place to shine. So I could see moves being made, no doubt. It's going to be an interesting draft. I'm glad Kenny's found a way to make it there. He's there right now, and I'll be there with him tomorrow in Montreal. I'm glad he found a way to make it there because I think there's a chance we could be busy tomorrow talking about the Jets.
Well, no doubt. And hopefully, he'll have boots on the ground because who knows how long the flights are going to take with what's happening with air travel. Yeah. I hope all the first-round prospects can actually get there in time to hear their names called on Thursday night. Wouldn't that be a disaster if you have a bunch of canceled flights? This has been awesome. Well, Shawnee, of course, yesterday, Rick Bowness on KNR. Check out the YouTube channel for that. Fill us in on what you've got going on this week. Of course, GM meetings, and we'll hear from Kevin Cheveldayoff, and then see what happens on Thursday and Friday, and you guys will be all over it for Sportsnet, I take it?
Yeah, you bet. I mean, first and foremost, that's our jobs. We got to hop on that. But we're going to have a Kenny and Rennie tonight with Sammy Cosentino. I don't have a time hammered down yet. Ken actually called while I was on here, probably to give me the time. But we're going to, kind of drill into the draft and see the possibilities that exist there for where the Jets sit and, some of the other more interesting storylines. And then we're just going to get talking Jets for the rest of the week. I think we're going to have 4 shows in total. So we're going to start up the Kenny and Rennie machine again here. Hopefully supplement some of the stuff that you guys do. Again, we always appreciate the traffic you send to us, and we always see the massive bump in our show when we go on after you at 3 o'clock and you send your crowd our way. We always appreciate that. It means a lot to us.
The pleasure is all ours. Of course, we love the content, and the more the better right now in Winnipeg, with so much to talk about this Winnipeg Jets team. Folks, hit that subscribe button here as well as over at Kenny and Rennie. I think this is a good time to remember, turn your notifications on so when the guys go live tonight, you'll get a notification. You can jump in and get ready for the draft with the boys and Sam Cosentino. Rendog, thanks for doing this, man. Have a great week, and maybe we can catch up next week in the aftermath of what is expected to be a pretty impactful week for the Winnipeg Jets.
I would love to. Let's do it.
Appreciate it, pal. There he is, Sean Reynolds. You can follow him on Twitter at SN Sean Reynolds. And again, keep an eye out for a special draft edition of KNR a little bit later on today on their YouTube channel. All right, Murat is coming up from Montreal in just a couple minutes. Hey, our friends at Manitoba Battery is the home of the $99 Deep Cycle battery. You won't find anyone in town that can compete with that price, whether it's for the camper, boat, your solar system, or anything else. You'll get the best price and the best service from the guys and gals down at Manitoba Battery. Plus, Not only you're going to get the best price, but you're going to save yourself a ton of time because they're going to bring the battery to your door at no extra cost when you live inside the perimeter. And for you folks that may live a little outside the city, but within the Winnipeg area, they'll still bring it to you for a small additional fee. Forget the big box stores when it comes to batteries. Shop local, get a better price, and enjoy the convenience and service that Manitoba Battery has to offer. Hit them up online at manitobabattery.com or go visit the team in the coolest JetBlue building in Winnipeg at 1026 Logan Avenue, open 8 to 6 daily. I had a great time yesterday talking with Greg from Royal Sports about the upcoming summer. I know we spent a lot of time talking about all the great Jets gear, Bomber gear, and merchandise that they have. But this is the time to be getting outside. They've got an expanded fitness section, tons of racket sports, tennis, and more. And of course, disc golf. If you haven't tried it, you'll have a heck of a lot of fun doing it. And they have a ton of discs and equipment that have come in over the last few weeks to help you dominate summer. Of course, softball, baseball, and more. And of course, a huge selection of bikes. Royal Sports really does have it all. Pop on down to the Superstore, 750 Pembina Highway, and check them out online at Royal Sports Pembina. On Instagram, of course, and we have the latest news on merchandise drops, sales, and of course, a big tent sale coming up after Labor Day as well. And our friends at Culligan Water continue to be the leaders in the water game, locally owned and celebrating over 65 years in business. They've got water softeners, filters, bottled water coolers, whole home systems, and drinking water systems, not to mention citywide water delivery services, as well as commercial and industrial water products and solutions. Culligan Water, 1200 Sargent, 694-5180, and online at drinkculligan.com. Big weekend in golf heading into the Open Championship the following week. Scottish Open, I believe 14 of the top 15 players in the world are there. And some really interesting comments today from Billy Horschel on some of the players that have defected to Live Golf. That story is not going away anytime soon. But the focus of the golf world will be overseas. Of course, the Barbasol as well. We'll actually hit that on the Lock Shop tomorrow. Of course, when we talk golf on the program, we do it for our friends at Breezy Bend, one of Manitoba's top private clubs. If you're looking for a long-term home for you and your family on an amazing golf course with a great social scene and programs for all members of the family, Breezy Bend's the spot. Give them a call. Talk to our friend Corey Johnson about getting on the waiting list for next year, or find out more online at breezybend.ca. All right, it's draft week. Murat Atesh has boots on the ground in Montreal, and we have a lot to talk to with Murat. Let's welcome him in now. What's going on? How are your travels out east?
Hey, travels have gone really smoothly. This is my nephew's taking a nap edition of my guest spots on Winnipeg Sports Talk. I just learned that I don't know enough bedtime songs. So we've started off a little bit on the weak side. We're going to up our game. And of course, we're going to make it all about the Winnipeg Jets. I'm checking into the hotel in just a couple hours time to join all of my The Athletic colleagues and get this thing underway.
I got to tell you, you sound great. I mean, you could record an album of children's songs with that mic you've got going on, Murat. It looks good. Beautiful Canada flag outside. And of course, I imagine there's a real buzz in Montreal about this draft. I mean, a draft's always exciting for all member clubs, but when you think about what the Habs have been through over the course of the last 12 months, picking number one overall, still I think some intrigue as to who goes number one after we just assumed that Shane Wright's been the guy for a long time. Outside of our main focus on the Winnipeg Jets, this is always an exciting time, but I imagine there's a real buzz for Thursday's festivities already in Montreal.
Yeah, it's the sort of atmosphere that you get at playoff time, right? Where all the buses would say, "Go Jets, go," or "Go Habs, go," or wherever the city is. I got my haircut. You can't tell because I didn't chop much of it off earlier today. But everybody in the city is basically talking about what an opportunity it is for Montreal to draft number one overall in front of their fans, to have other important picks as well, new management in place. This is a situation where things have really aligned, I think, for the Canadians to try to transform their organization, move past the Carey Price era if they need to, accelerate their rebuild if they need to do that as well. I mean, there's a sense that behind, or soon to be in front of, Nick Suzuki and otherwise Cole Caulfield and the rest, that Montreal might be able to compete for the playoffs soon, whether that's Shane Wright or Slavkovsky or, as of yet to be unseen fireworks from that organization with all eyes on them right now.
Yeah, I mean, it will be fascinating. We've heard that their general manager might try and get another top 10 pick and really make a splash, but it's a pretty good starting point with the number one first pick overall. Listen, we'll get back to the draft from a Jet perspective in a minute, but of course, we got to start off with the big news, of course, that happened on Canada Day when everyone was off the grid. Rick Bowness, as reported by Darren Dreger, officially announced on Sunday as the head coach, introduced yesterday, is the new guy behind the bench. What was your first reaction when you heard Rick Bowness? Because I don't know about you, I really caught me off guard considering many of the names that most of the insiders had been throwing out that were sort of down to the final choices for Winnipeg.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I mean, I feel like I have been fairly close to a lot of the discussion around the Winnipeg Jets head coaching search. And despite that, Rick Bowness's name was a surprise to me on Friday morning. I had even previously, I think it was Thursday when Kevin Weeks was talking about Rick Tocchet as a front runner. I had also heard about Rick Tocchet as a front runner, and I was tweeting about that as a possibility as late as Thursday. But the interesting thing is that after I tweeted that, one of my sources said, you know what, maybe back off on the Rick Tocchet thing. I'm not sure that it's 100% going to be him. And then that sort of perked my ears. I wasn't able to get any sort of clarity on who else it might have been because, of course, by then Jim Montgomery was off the board, but we'd heard some other names. You always wonder if, Pascal Vincent, all these other sorts of things as well. Rick Tocchet, of course. And then Rick Bowness, which seems to make all kinds of sense in hindsight with connections to the organization, familiarity with the coaching staff, including Scott Arniel being brought on board. There's a lot of different things that sort of make him and Winnipeg sing, at least from an organizational familiarity point of view. I have to be honest, I was stunned. I didn't know that was going to happen whatsoever.
Now, you've got an extensive piece in The Athletic, folks. You should be subscribing and checking out all of Murat's work over there. It's what Winnipeg Jets are getting in Rick Bowness as the next head coach. I'll tell you one thing, certainly a guy that is phenomenal in front of a microphone. I think, it just goes to show the reputation he had has been well-earned as one of the true class acts in the National Hockey League. He was charming yesterday. I think he said a lot of the right things to fans that were on the fence. But you've dug into this quite a bit. We'll just get right to it. What are the Jets getting in this head coach? And, where's your level of optimism that some of the things that plagued the Jets last season in that disappointing year can turn around under the 67-year-old?
Yeah, first of all, it's almost impossible to talk about him without referencing his age, 67 years old. He's not, an old-sounding person to speak to. He doesn't sound like hockey has passed him by or anything like that. He's certainly an articulate speaker, an energized guy. He, talks about playing a modern, more difficult to play against game and all sorts of stuff. I was able to stream most of that press conference and then follow it afterwards while I was on an airplane to here in Montreal. Certainly an articulate speaker. And what we've been talking about all along is what does Winnipeg need the most? It needs a sense of accountability. It needs a sense of buy-in. There have been some criticisms of why would you need a veteran coach or perhaps the most veteran coach. If you count all of his assistant coaching gigs, I believe he stood behind an NHL bench for more games than any other coach in National Hockey League history. But I don't think you can walk into the Winnipeg Jets room right now as a green rookie, no matter how brilliant you are, and turn things all of the way around. So I think that's going to be, an important presence for him. In terms of actual resume, that's what the piece that you're referencing does at The Athletic. It goes through what he did in Dallas. And there's a couple of key things that stand out in contrast to what Winnipeg has done in the last few years, and a couple of things that are going to be quite familiar. One, well-spoken, articulate coach who gives great quotes no matter what's going on the ice. That reminds me of Paul Maurice. The other thing is Dallas relied really heavily on a top six and bottom six formation with the checking line built very veteran heavy around Radek Faksa on that third line, even when they were getting outshot, even when they were getting outscored, even when it wasn't going well. So Adam Lowry, congratulations, step right up. Mason Appleton as well, I'm sure. Your job is going to be a tough minutes checking line next season. But there's some nice things, too. In Winnipeg, we're used to seeing Mark Scheifele, Kyle Connor, and others well over 20 minutes, all situation minutes. Maybe I've heard people on other teams tell me the game plan against Winnipeg, wait till those guys get tired, they'll make a mistake, they'll miss a defensive assignment, will roll. And, well, Rick Bowness's teams have kept a tight minutes spread between 10 and 20 minutes. Nobody's below 10, nobody's above 20. And that's kind of an encouraging sign from the forward group that you're probably going to see ice time measured with performance, ice time sort of a little bit more of an active fourth line and a little bit less over-dependence on the absolute top guys. The other positive thing I can say, Huss, is, he trusted a 22-year-old young defenseman to lead that entire team in minutes played last season and even before. Miro Heiskanen, who we know Ville Heinola is a huge fan of. He said that he admires the way he plays, no fear, has led that defense core for the last few years, and that happened under veteran coach Rick Bowness. So it's possible that if you're a young mobile defenseman, transition-heavy, modern style of play, that if you do things the way Rick Bowness asks, you may, as a young player, despite the veteran coach, think that your odds of minutes next season just went up a little bit.
It's interesting you bring that up because, that has been, one of the things I think we spent quite a bit of time talking about since it was announced that Rick is the new head coach, is the work that he did in Dallas. The run to the Cup final in 2020 was crazy. And then, the last time we saw him behind the bench, they were pushing the Calgary Flames to overtime in Game 7. Listen, their goaltender had a big part of it as well. But, we knew, everyone thought that was going to be a sweep, and it was far from it. But when you look, and maybe we'll start with Ville Heinola. Is he one of these guys? But who on paper do you think are the winners with this changeover to Rick Bowness? And, who maybe projects to have a more legitimate opportunity to take their game and their role to the next level?
I think young defensemen like Ville Heinola, Dylan Samberg, certainly that's possible. And not just from him, but, I'm hearing Nolan Baumgartner is a possibility for D coach. He balanced the minutes between young and old, no matter what your resume was or how high you were paid in Vancouver. There was a real sense that young players could be trusted, especially on the blue line there. I think that's encouraging. I think young forwards, perhaps even like Cole Perfetti, that would be encouraging for them. I don't think big minutes are disappearing for your Mark Scheifele's and Kyle Connors of the world, and they shouldn't. Kyle Connor, obviously 93 points last season. He did play over 21 minutes per night on average all situations because he played power play and PK as well. You might see that clawed back a little bit more close to that 20-minute mark. And I wouldn't necessarily look at that as an enormous loss, depending on what leverage situations those would be. Adam Lowry, like I say, his minutes are going up. The interesting thing, too, is the real attention to context that Rick Bowness uses when he allots his minutes. A team that's down by 1 would roll its 3 most heavy offensive players. You could see a reunion. I'm thinking maybe Scheifele, Connor, and Ehlers I see as the 3 most offensive players, perhaps Pierre-Luc Dubois, and on a given night. You're going to see offensive players in offensive roles, and then say the Jets are looking to protect the lead. You're going to see a very, very, very different lineup, and probably those minutes scale back, and you see more Lowry and all of that sort of stuff. So that's other than maybe an over-reliance on top 6, bottom 6, it looks like some smart bench management from Rick Bowness the last few years.
Well, let's get to Scheifele because his situation is so tied to, this team going forward. He has been a franchise player for this team. And, up until recently, I certainly was of the opinion it was highly unlikely that he would be back. It sounds like that is not the case. He took the call from Rick Bowness, apparently had a nice chat. How much do you think Scheifele's situation, the apparent want to try and work this out and bring him back, in your mind, is tied to the uncertainty about the future of Pierre-Luc Dubois?
That's where I see it, because sort of the same time that we were hearing a change in tone from the Winnipeg Jets, or, the Winnipeg Jets were never saying we're absolutely trading Mark Scheifele. In fact, I believe that Cheveldayoff told NHL.com, no, we're not actively looking to shop him, or no, he didn't request a trade in his exit interview. At the same time, my understanding of that exit interview was that it was heated, that there was some emotion to it as well. And that it was not a particularly happy time at that end of the season. But then by the time you hear about Pierre-Luc Dubois' likelihood of testing unrestricted free agency 2 years from now, and you really start to get the sense that Mark Scheifele becomes an extremely important player, that's when the verbal changed to me. That's when I think the tone coming from the Winnipeg Jets changed. And that makes Scheifele one of Rick Bowness's most important first calls. Glad that they had that connection, and certainly it would bode well for Jets fans that Bowness told reporters in Winnipeg yesterday that Scheifele is all in, because he needs to be. We might see transformation or turnover in the form of a Blake Wheeler move. I still think that's possible, but Scheifele, with an uncertain future for Pierre-Luc Dubois, is a massively important player for the Winnipeg Jets, and they need him as all in as he can possibly be.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt about it, and I think a fresh voice, a guy like Bowness with that sort of experience. And I think the way that he connects with individuals, and he's been doing this for his entire career, probably even more so when he was an assistant coach and an associate coach, and even his time as a head coach. But we know that how things worked out in Dallas. I would say this: the opportunity for Scheif to come back with somewhat of a clean slate and be that player that he had been in the past, I think is greater with Rick Bowness in the mix than maybe some of the other players, which brings us to Blake Wheeler. I'm sure you heard yesterday Judy Owen ask if he talked to the captain, said that he called him, left a message, and got a text back, and they would be talking at some point. Is Blake Wheeler a Jet next week, do you think?
Next week, maybe next season. I'm really not thinking that that's the case. I think this is a situation where player and club are more or less interested in moving on from each other at this stage. It would be the end of really quite an era. You go back to, I take it back to that $8.25 million extension, signed after the 2017-18 playoffs, which I considered to be a bet on the franchise's part on Blake Wheeler as a person and as a player to be that leader who's going to take the Jets to continue deep playoff runs right through 2024, when that and Mark Scheifele and Connor Hellebuck's contracts eventually came to an end as well. That's sort of the bet that the franchise made. And right from, we haven't seen that level of success. We've seen an awful lot of difficulty, and that includes, Dustin Byfuglien's departure. I don't think anybody predicted that. All sorts of things. But I don't think things have gone the way that player or club imagined that they would when they signed that particular contract. He's still a contributing player. He's still a useful player. But I do get the sense that he would like to move on. He's definitely open to it at bare minimum, and Winnipeg would like to move on as well. And let me just tell you, anyone, you don't have to be a general manager or a head coach. You give somebody a phone call, get a text back. That's not the most that's not a date waiting to happen, is it? That's a gentle rejection coming in your future.
Yeah, listen, I will hold out the possibility, and it was the 4th of July, maybe they're out off the grid or something like that. But the bottom line is, this was announced we knew that it was happening on Friday. I'm sure at that point the reaching out began. So, once you get to the Monday and there still hasn't been a connection with the captain of the team, I think kind of tells you where things are going to be going. As far as moves, though, this week, the draft is always a spot, where plenty of trades are happening. What's more likely? Or is it both? Potentially a move with the captain, or the conversation that we keep going back to, the logjam on the blue line and what defenseman may be traded. Does it happen this week, I guess? How significant of player moves do you think we might see heading into Thursday and over the course of the weekend?
Well, this is when moves happen, and it just makes sense. GMs are in a room together. They're having those communications in an accelerated fashion. Draft picks can be on the table. It's a time where there's plenty of time to sort out the salary cap. It's a really flexible time with communication. Moves can and will happen. Does that automatically mean Winnipeg will make its two that we're sort of forecasting? Because I am hearing that Blake Wheeler is not likely to be a Winnipeg Jet next year. I'm not sure that happens. It could well happen this week. And then the other one that you mentioned, a defenseman, the sense that I get, the more that I put things together here, it's to me, the most likely candidate is Brendan Dillon to be moved. He's somebody who I've heard interest from other teams. He's also on the left side, which is a little bit more crowded, and his cap hit at $3.9 million is a little bit more palatable for other teams. I think you look at some of the other veterans, Nate Schmidt, that contract's going to be too expensive for other teams to take on. Dylan DeMello, for example, as well, playing on the right side with Josh Morrissey. It's harder to move those players. I think that Brendan Dillon is going to be the one. And then it depends on what Winnipeg looks for in return. Are they looking for an extra pick and maybe they can use picks in player transactions? Well, then we could see that happen, this coming week. But these are not moves with a draft deadline. They may be moves with a free agency period deadline as teams get sorted out in terms of what their rosters are going to look like for sure next year.
Well, and of course, free agency coming up next week. And I think that is when we'll probably spend a lot of time talking about, the adds to the Winnipeg Jets. And, I'm not sure whether they'll be big game hunters or being on any of the top players up front. And one thing benefiting Cheveldayoff and the Jets, I think, from a trading defense aspect, is the fact that the defense UFA pool isn't particularly strong. So maybe that gives them a better opportunity to do it. Do you think we'll see 2 defensemen move this summer, or do you think it'll just be 1?
I'm leaning 1. I really am, because on the account of injuries happening, on the account of, the fact that Heinola and Sandberg are each still waivers exempt, you can send them to the Moose if you need to, because everybody's healthy, or if their performance doesn't match what it has been in the past. That gives, a safety net. You do have to bring up Jonathan Kovacevic, I believe, unless you're going to try to pass him through waivers, because his exemption just ran out. I think Kovacevic would be a great 6 or 7 guy. I do think it seems to me to be more Winnipeg Jets to move the 1 veteran and 1 veteran only. I would be surprised, and I would be really intrigued by their plans for young defensemen next year if we see 2 of them moved.
Well, and this gets, in some ways, this gets back to the Wheeler talk, because, there has been discussions that the Winnipeg Jets, might give up an asset to move the entire contract off the books. I'm of the opinion that it's far more likely that if they have to do one or the other, they eat a significant part of the salary and try and get some significant return. I think, Wheeler at $4.5 or $5 million is a lot more palatable for a team for the next couple seasons. And I think it makes that asset come back a little bit more. But the way that deal is shaped up, the bottom line is, I don't think for a second the Winnipeg Jets are moving on Ville Heinola or trading him to get rid of a contract before he gets a significant opportunity to be a regular in the National Hockey League. And I don't know, I'm certainly of the opinion that with Rick Bowness coming in as the head coach, based on what he did in Dallas, the likelihood of that legitimate opportunity is far more probable to happen.
Yeah, I agree with all of that, especially if you consider what Kevin Cheveldayoff has said. I've been asking him about Ville Heinola versus the usage of Ville Heinola for about 1.5 years now. And, as recently as last summer, you'd hear the really distinct difference between what he would say about Heinola and him being the future versus what Paul Maurice would say. And, Paul Maurice would say those players aren't ready. He's not ready. David Gustafson's not ready. At the same time, you'd have Kevin Cheveldayoff selling them as the future in the not too distant future. I think that the organization is ready for those young players to take more prominent roles. And because they're capable, or at least will be given the chance to be capable, this isn't a rebuild. This isn't, just because a Blake Wheeler or a Brendan Dillon would be moved and some younger players would get more of an opportunity. I mean, that's not the dreaded rebuild word. That's a team trying to remain as competitive as possible. And I'm with you as well, because Blake Wheeler's still a capable hockey player. $8.25 million, no, not a cap efficient contract whatsoever. But he scores a 5-on-5 like a middle six player. That's an NHL player. He's not a fourth liner. He's not a power play specialist. He's an actual contributing NHL hockey player. So eating salary, I think, is probably where that goes. And if an asset needs to be included, I don't think it'll be nearly as substantial as a top prospect.
And I guess I want to tie this back to Nikolai Ehlers and, maybe more of the conversation of guys that have the most to gain under a new voice and a new head coach that when we look back, and you talk about this in the piece, I mean, when Rick Bowness took over, this was Tyler Seguin and Jamie Benn. And when he finished up last season, he was throwing Rupi Hintz and Jason Robertson over the boards far more. And at times we saw Jamie Benn playing like 13, 14 minutes a game. I really do think that Ehlers might stand to benefit the most out of this move, because it's pretty clear that I think Rick's going to come in and have Nikolai Ehlers as being not only a top-line player, but also a guy that finally gets a chance to make an impact regularly on a power play unit.
Yeah, and it's astonishing to me because I've written at such length and I detail it in that piece that Nick Ehlers' name wasn't the first one out of my mouth earlier when you asked me that question. I don't think Rick Bowness has been in the business of sitting his best players demoting his best players to a second line plus no power play context for the last little while. Just like the example that you gave, veteran Joe Pavelski comes in, he gets big minutes, but he's delivering in a really 200-foot capacity, and they leaned heavily on that line with him, Robertson and Hintz at different times. So with Nikolai Ehlers, I just struggle to think, especially in a post-Blake Wheeler world where there's another winger job open as well. I just cannot imagine a team looking at him, a Rick Bowness-led staff looking at Nikolai Ehlers and not promoting him to first line even strength minutes, which he's flirted with that at different stretches in the past, but also that power play as well. And Huss, let's talk about Ehlers and Wheeler together. Blake Wheeler was one of the world's best, and I mean best, 6th or 7th in the world in even strength point production through the peak of his career when he was making 5.6 million or whatever that number was prior to the 8.25. You know, if you look at his peak years, there were few, and you could think of so many famous names who were on first all-star teams at the end of the year, who got awards recognition, all of that sort of stuff. It was, you know, almost robbery in my mind looking back, especially given what we know about possession and how Blake Wheeler drove play in addition to the points for so many years. That is criminal. He was underrated in my mind on a league-wide basis. Nikolai Ehlers over the last 3 seasons, points per minute of ice time, has averaged at a higher scoring rate than Blake Wheeler during the prime of his career. Like, we are at the risk, without that player getting first-line leverage minutes, of watching a second straight elite winger get criminally underrated. And that doesn't even touch Kyle Connor, who, of course, that's a Winnipeg thing, not getting league-wide acclaim. We know Kyle Connor gets the minutes and generates the offense here, but Nikolai Ehlers isn't getting necessarily any of that right now. And I think he does have the most room to grow. And I'd be stunned. I'd be absolutely stunned if Bowness doesn't recognize that.
And one other guy I think we should probably mention is Connor Hellebuck. Because, I mean, the one thing we've talked a lot about accountability, and a lot of that comes back to defensive responsibility and aptitude. And, man, we saw it in games against the Winnipeg Jets, and we certainly saw it against the Calgary Flames in the playoffs, that Bones has been able to get his players to buy in and be committed to the defense. And listen, that it will be a very good thing for number 37, who, to be honest, has probably been out on an island more often than not than most other NHL goaltenders over the last couple seasons.
Yeah, it's about time he got that help. It's funny he got a little bit more help this season. Still shelled, still too much defensive time, and actually his numbers came off. But what Rick Bowness has done in Dallas, this isn't Barry Trotz, one of the 2 or 3 best defensive coaches that exist on the planet, but this is a consistent top 10 team in terms of defense, whether you're measuring it by goals against or expected goals against, the sort of shot quality metrics. Presumably Connor Hellebuck's job just got easier. Of course, we have to recognize that there are miles of ground to travel between, Paul Stastny's comments about not respecting each other enough and not committing to the 200-foot game enough and actually doing those things. But Rick Bowness's impact where he's been has been to improve the defensive quality, and that's supported by players who've played for him. That's supported by an analytic perspective as well. Connor Hellebuck presumably gets to breathe, and ideally he doesn't play close to 70 games or whatever as well. I spoke to Eric Comrie last week, by the way, and I believe he hopes to sign on with Winnipeg and be a part of the long-term solution in Winnipeg as well.
No doubt about it. Murat of The Athletic is with us. Hey, folks, if you haven't already, make sure you hit that red subscribe button. You can join us daily here at 1 o'clock Central here on Winnipeg Sports Talk. And, of course, Murat will have a ton for you coming up in The Athletic over the next few days. I know right now I'm sort of most focused on, player moves and what might happen with the general manager. But there is, of course, a draft coming up, and the Jets have 2 picks in the first round. Well, what's your feeling on the way the Jets approach this? And I know there's a lot of mocks out right now, but is there a player or two that you're sort of identifying either at 14 or 30 that might be a likely selection if available for the squad?
Yeah, I mean, the 2 that come to mind at 14, which is interesting to narrow it down to 2 because the way that the board might break, it seems like there's a lot of depth of top-end talent, but not this extreme top-end talent. So you've seen lots of different options become available by number 14. But if you look in Winnipeg's backyard, you have the possibility that big centerman Connor Geekie is going to be available. That's a player that I think would be difficult to pass up on if you're the Winnipeg Jets. You've seen him in your backyard. He has the NHL pedigree. He has the size. He has the skill. He's been doing it for a lot of years and can be an impact player, projects as a big center. The other one, though, goes to Winnipeg's wheelhouse, which has been these US NDTP programs, the Americans that end up going to play college. And it would be interesting to me to see Frank Nazar be available at 14 overall. He's 5'10", 5'11", which was definitely going to dissuade some Jets fans who were already thinking Cole Perfetti and Chaz Lucius are too small, or the NHL group is too small. But he is an absolute burner. He's a point producer. He goes to hard areas. He's not a wallflower. Frank Nazar is a centerman who I think would be interesting to the Winnipeg Jets based on their history at 14 as well. There's the ever-present question of will there be Russians taken by the Jets, such as defenseman Pavel Mintyukov at 14 overall, or whether it's Korchinski, whether it's even Denton Matachuk with Manitoban ties available at 14 overall. But my guess is you see a center there, and then you see the Jets completely reevaluate by the time 30 hits around.
Well, and what's interesting, and I think you sort of touched on this, Murat, but I mean, the Jets have had a number of picks in sort of this range in the, the mid part of the draft. And, whether it was Kyle Connor, whether it was Cole Perfetti, we have seen them essentially just wait to see how the board breaks out. And, more often than not, there's been a guy available that they've had rated significantly higher, and it's turned out pretty well for the club. That, I imagine, will be the plan at 14. Do you think that they take maybe a little bit more risk with the second first-round pick, looking to hit a big home run, or is it, again, just going by the board and taking the best player available?
I think that what they'll do is they'll put their players in tiers, and they may take a bigger swing from their top tier available at 30th overall. And I know in a mock draft that we had at The Athletic, extremely interesting, intriguing, once thought of as a top 5 talent, even Miroshnichenko became available, and I took him for the Winnipeg Jets, thinking that they'd be willing to take a risk like that. A huge home run swing, was thought of as a top 5 talent, but has had health issues and otherwise that make one wonder whether he'll be a top 15, top 20, whether he'll go at the end of the first round. I'm not sure that the Winnipeg Jets are first in line to take the enormous, so-called gamble on Russian players right now. But that is the sort of thinking, the idea that you have the opportunity when you have that many picks, and if you've come out of 14 with a player that you genuinely believe is going to, become a successful player for you, that there's a little bit more room to wheel a little bit. At the same time, I don't think Winnipeg was exactly reaching with Jack Roslovic when they took Kyle Connor earlier on. Maybe Logan Stanley was a little bit of a project once they had Patrick Laine in the mix, so that justifies it as well. I think they have room to go for that top ceiling and play a little bit with 30.
Murat, this has been awesome. Fill us in on what you've got coming up in The Athletic over the next few days out in Montreal.
Well, we got draft coverage for sure. Going to have some reflections on picks, and that'll be led by Corey Pronman and Scott Wheeler. We're so lucky to have prospect experts on our site. Plus, all of these NHL writers from The Athletic will have 30 plus people, I think 40 plus people at the draft. So that's exciting. We'll collaborate on some draft coverage. We have to fill out Winnipeg's coaching staff as well. Like I say, Scott Arniel has been announced as the associate coach. That was locked in for an extremely long period of time.
Yeah, nice work on that, by the way. You were out there on that for a long time. It took a little while, but exactly as you called, geez, a month or two ago.
I appreciate that. I appreciate the nod. Yeah, I checked. It was May 31st. So that was something, that was an organizational priority. I'm not as certain about this, but I'm definitely hearing, some optimism for Nolan Baumgartner out of Vancouver, and definitely a familiar person to Winnipeg Jets. He's been not so successful with the Vancouver PK, but I've liked some of the progressive things he's done with their defense. So if he's their defense coach, you might also think that Ville Heinola or Dylan Samberg or Logan Stanley or whoever's going to get the job done based on performance, age won't matter so much anymore. That's kind of that's an intriguing one to me, depending on what skills he brings over, if it doesn't indeed end up being him. And then last but not least, I have a story that I think is pretty fun about what I think is Winnipeg's best draft pick ever, and some of the behind the scenes tomfoolery that led to Winnipeg picking him when they did.
Cannot wait to read it. That's a one heck of a tease, my friend. Hey, have a great time out in Montreal. Going to be a very exciting week for everyone involved in the National Hockey League, but I think in particular for Jets watchers, considering what we expect to happen, whether it's today, tomorrow, the next day, next week, we know that there's a lot more change coming to this organization as we get through this offseason. Thanks so much for doing this, pal.
Thanks for having me, Huss.
Great stuff. At WPG Murat on Twitter. Make sure you're following all of his social media pops, and of course, check out his work at The Athletic. All right. We're going to talk some Bombers and get reaction to the Jets hire from one Troy Westwood coming in just a second. Before we do that, if you're thinking about getting a new vehicle this summer, don't go anywhere before popping by and visiting the experts down at Knott Auto Corp. Why not get into the car of your dreams at a great price with the help of the Knott team? And if you're thinking about going electric, they've been the leaders in Tesla sales for years in Winnipeg. and also talk to them about that Tesla Experience program where you'll find out everything you need to know about considering a switch from a traditional vehicle to an electric one. Not Auto Corps at Waverly and McGillivray, and you can check them out online at not.ca. Hey, you folkies getting ready for the Folk Fest coming up on the weekend? Well, when you're out there, make sure to check out Little Brown Jug's newest beer, the Folk Fest Lager. It's available now at the brewery and tap room. You can also order online at littlebrownjug.ca, along with all their other wonderful beers and the summer variety pack. But the Folk Fest Lager, a great new beer from Little Brown Jug, ready just in time for the big gathering out at Big Bird's Hill on the weekend. Hey, I popped into BP last night with some of the fellas to watch the game. Always a great spot to gather with the gang to watch on the big screens with big sound. And don't forget the great happy hour deals available at your local Boston Pizza from 3 to 6 and 9 to 12 each and every day. And, of course, check out that new summer menu on right now, including carnitas tacos, a new pizza, and, of course, pizza flights are back as well. And, hey, Bombers are back. Just one more home game. I think they've got one home game over the course of the 6 games that began with yesterday. But a week Friday, they'll be back at home. And when you're heading out to the game, make sure to get there early and take part in the Princess Auto tailgate party. We've got so much going on. Cheap beers, hot dogs, drinks, great entertainment with my guy DJ Finesse, and the Princess Auto staff will be there giving out prizes as well to Winnipeg Blue Bomber fans. 2 hours before the game, it's on outside at the Princess Auto tailgate zone. Of course, Princess Auto proud sponsors the Gold Eyes, the Bombers, and the place where you'll find the best deals and the most unique assortment of tools and equipment around. Everything you need to complete the projects on your list or start something new is at Princess Auto. Visit them at one of 2 Winnipeg locations, Panet Road or Portage Avenue West. And you can always shop online 24/7, 365 at princessauto.com. All right, we will get to those CFL lines and the Coolbet lines a little later on. Bombers, underdogs on the road coming up on Saturday. We'll also get to our picks for Assiniboia Downs tonight for live racing. But right now, let's welcome in longtime voice of the big show on our old station, the one and only Troy Westwood. What is going on, my man? Great to have you back on the program.
Living the dream, Huss. Great seeing you, man.
Good summer. How's the fam? Hitting the pitch quite a bit lately. What's going on?
Yeah, basically, the pitch, and just saying that makes my heart warm, man. But just anything to do with soccer is basically a home away from home for our family year round, more or less, man.
Well, we're gonna have lots of soccer talk in November of all months coming up for the World Cup. And actually, great to hear that Canada Soccer's actually tabled a new offer to the players, both the men's and the women's. Hopefully that can be put in the rear view and we can get some quality preparation for this tournament for the first time in many of our lifetimes. But Westy, I want to talk Jets with you, but of course we had some Monday Night Football in the Canadian, in the CFL last night. Bombers get to 4-0, bit of a nail biter, and one of the more bizarre games I can remember. I mean, between the touchdown that the Bombers gave up to that crazy Harlem Globetrotters-esque pick, and then, of course, karma coming back. I mean, the Argos won their game on a missed field goal shorter than a convert, and then, I mean, maybe the biggest leg in the CFL misses a chip shot last night, and the Bombers win by 1. What were your takeaways from last night's win for the team to get to 4-0?
You know, we talked about this just off air a little bit, Huss, but my premier takeaway was, man, I and they sure miss Andrew Harris. And I know the old Wally Buono, it's better to get rid of a guy a year too early than a year too late. I don't know when his engine is going to run out, and when you're going to see that diminishing sort of return there. But my goodness, he is such a joy to watch. And hey, leading into this game, that's basically the talk, I think, around the city and province, right? Is that just that offense really misses Andrew Harris? You see him flex last night, cause a fair amount of trouble, and just the level of consistency and the way the man runs with that ball, he's beautiful to watch. And it kind of worked out perfect, I guess, for people that really miss him, right? He had a great game. The Bombers walk out with a win, so I guess that's perfect. Yeah,
but you are absolutely right, and we hit this earlier on. I mean, I think if Andrew Harris is playing for the Bombers last night, the Bombers comfortably win that football game.
Agreed, man.
I mean, the Bombers had 60 yards on the ground. We wouldn't be having this conversation if Brady Oliveira was tearing it up and Johnny Augustine, but that hasn't happened. What do you make of that, Troy? I mean, is this, a young player that's just not getting the job done, or is it more that, the offensive line's changed up a little bit? Obviously, you've got the center out right now. Sometimes it's easy to blame one guy for a lack of success in an aspect of the game. But of course, you're going to look at the guy carrying the football because we knew what this team did with 33 in the backfield for so many years.
I've got a real soft spot in my heart for Oliveira, as a Winnipeg kid, and even closer than that. He just was his family. We know the family and that sort of thing. So I thought that passing the baton was going to be a fairly smooth transition with he and Augustine, right? Two guys kind of cut from the same cloth sort of thing, but they're not there yet. And so, you just can't watch the Bombers play and say, yeah, that it's been an incredibly smooth transition. Those two young guys are running with the same sort of relentlessness that you see from Andrew Harris. It just hasn't really happened yet. And maybe it's even more like whatever that spiritual connection, if I may, that Andrew Harris seemed to have with the entire team, really big time with the offense. It's just something isn't in sync yet. You ask a great question, Huss. How much of that is possibly the O-line, other contributing factors. But like you point out, man, it hasn't quite happened that those two young, very good athletes have taken over and really cemented that position yet.
Yeah, and I'm with you. I mean, if you look at, the data, you look at the way professional sports works, I mean, there is a shelf life of particular players and running backs, especially into their 30s. I mean, they just simply don't have years like Andrew Harris has had recently. But this guy's an outlier. He's been an outlier for his entire football career. And looking at the way he played last night for the Toronto Argonauts, it was so strange to see him in double blue as opposed to blue and gold. But it's quite clear he still is the premier running back in this league right now.
Yeah. Yes, agreed. I agree, man. He still to this day, I've never been affected as a fan watching the games the way that he affects me, man. Like he makes you want to get up and run through a wall in the living room. It's just the craziest thing. But I'm right there with you, Huss. That doesn't appear there's any sort of a drop off. And with his age, I don't even know how old is he now. Well into his mid-30s sort of thing.
Yeah,
it's crazy, and he's still delivering. But I think in an all-around sort of sense, right? Maybe there was that decision to end that relationship with the club. It seemed like a difficult one, and that maybe there's a little bit of complexity to it as well that we don't maybe know very clearly as the general public sort of thing. But a difficult decision. But bottom line is, Huss, I'm right there with you, man. There's no doubt Andrew Harris could still play this game, and like you said, the premier back in the league.
Well, and listen, I mean, from a Bomber standpoint, I mean, yes, they're 4-0 and it's about winning football games, but I mean, there's been a razor thin margin right now. And if all of a sudden, they're not dominating the turnover battle in a game and another team takes care of the football, we're maybe having a very different, conversation. And we'll get to that with, a huge matchup on Saturday against the British Columbia Lions. But before we do that, the one thing that you can count on is Willie Jefferson, Adam Bighill, and the boys on the Bomber defense making big plays, especially deep in their own end zone. For all the talk about the offense and the issues that they've had on and off so far this season, the Bomber defense is still a championship caliber unit.
And I guess ultimately that's pretty much apropos, right? Because you go back to the 84, 88, 90 realm, and boy, that defense just defined, like there's something, I don't know what it is, Huss, but for any of us that grew up here and have the tradition of the Blue Bombers, there's something about that defense that sort of, that when you have the aura of that level of defense going back over that time frame to where we are right now, and you've always got a sizable chance to win. You're always in the game. They seem to always be able to come through and make it happen. So, yeah, I think that everyone involved, fans, players, coaches, all that sort of thing, can still feel pretty comfortable about where this team is. There's no doubt something, a little bit of traction needs to happen with the offense. God help the rest of the CFL if and when that does happen. Until then, that defense is going to carry this team.
One of the other things that was interesting to see for people that were watching on the tube last night was the Argos almost brawling with each other on the sidelines. You spent a lot of time on sidelines. Do you ever remember teammates going at it in the middle of a game?
And I don't think so in the middle of a game. I remember during the Reinbold years, we had like the entire O-line against the entire D-line, and then that morphed into O versus D, and a couple of kickers, and Bobby and I just sort of stood away and watched it happen.
Commentary?
But, during the game, yeah. I mean, you love seeing that fire, right? I guess internally, I like seeing that fire, but But I mean, there's an offense, and there's a team that's struggling mightily offensively. And how about, and sorry for the sidebar here, Huss, but I just got a kick out. They showed on TSN this morning, they showed the CFL standings, the West on top of the East, just by chance, and it looked like it was all one division. Like, how horrible and embarrassing and pathetic can the East continue to be year after year after year? It's just, and I know that there's, Hamilton was strongest up, but right now you look at the standings and it's just horrible looking, isn't it, Huss?
It's hilarious. I mean, you've got two teams in first place at 1 and 2, an 0 and 3 team and an 0 and 4 team. And then, a team like the Elks that finally got off the mat and won a football game. I mean, they're still looking up at the rest of this division, with the reemergence of the British Columbia Lions, Saskatchewan, Calgary, and Winnipeg. And it's a tough neighborhood to be in.
Like, you can be 0 and 4 right now in the East, and you're still thinking we can win this division.
They could be in first place by next week.
That's crazy, man.
One game. Remis is throwing this up for folks that are looking at the YouTube. As I said, Edmonton, Edmonton's got the one win, and then you've got Saskatchewan in fourth place at 3-1 and 3 undefeated teams. Of course, one of those undefeated teams is the British Columbia Lions. And man, this is going to be a tough week for the Bombers. You come back from that game, very short week. I mean, they might get 1 day of practice. They'll do a walkthrough and travel out there and then take it on the team that has been the story of the Canadian Football League as a Canadian player. I memean, aside from having skin in the game, and of course we support the Bombers, what a story Nathan Rourke is so far this season, as well as the reemergence of BC that was, a bottom feeder last year.
Yeah, and they seem to be creating some excitement in a market that I thought was kind of out of touch, possibly forever, and unsolvable in Vancouver. So that's really cool, right? And the change in ownership and the whole marketing thing. And this Nathan Rourke thing, man, Huss, it's so doggone cool. I mean, if you would have told me really a couple years ago, there's going to be a Canadian quarterback to come in and really kind of stir the dust up to excite people. Like, when I see the Lions are playing, Huss, I want to go out of my way to watch that kid play. It's just such a neat, cool thing that I don't know if you would have given it much thought of possibility. Like, it just seemed like a far-fetched dream because the kids, if you were Canadian, if your birth certificate said Canadian, you just weren't even getting a sniff, basically, just X number of years ago. So just a absolutely fantastic thing to watch.
Well, and I was talking with some of the buddies last night watching the game, and we were talking about last weekend where Canadian quarterbacks won back-to-back games in the league. Yeah. I mean, like, has that ever happened before? I mean, I'm sure there were maybe some Canadians playing like way back then, but I mean, for a young man to go, like, we're not even talking about Rourke, for Ford to go in the first round, the first quarterback drafted in round 1 since 1980, and, get a start and get a win so early in his career, for Canadian football, it's really exciting. And I think there's a lot of people that have sort of, overlooked, you nailed it. I mean, overlooked Canadian players, especially at the quarterback position, just because of, listen, the factory that churns out players in the United States is incredible, but these guys didn't really get a shot. And I'll tell you what, if Nathan Rourke continues to do what he's doing, as well as Ford and Edmonton, I mean, maybe that changes the opportunity level and, the serious consideration for players that have grown up playing the 3-down game.
And Huss, just to add to what you're saying there, one of the most tragic things in, doing rifle games with bombing and in anyone that's been paying attention, a couple of receivers in the CFL were quarterbacks and then would change positions, right? Going into their senior year, certainly coming pro, because they knew there was no chance they were even going to get a sniff, like not even a look at playing quarterback. So what a guy like Nathan Rourke and this other Canadian talent that exists in the CFL, that they're actually getting the opportunity, and now young quarterbacks can continue to actually have the dream or just have the dream of playing pro ball in the CFL in that position, not feeling like they need to make a switch over to receiver or whatever it might be. That's just truly fantastic.
Let's get back to the Bombers for a minute before we flip over to the Jets. As I said, this is a very challenging week for the Bombers. They're going to play a top team on a short week, traveling from Toronto, traveling to BC. How do you think Mike O'Shea handles the team? Like, what do you think the message is to the club? Because again, 4-0, you're here to win football games, and they're doing that right now. But as I said, I'm sure there's a number of areas where he'd like to see this team improve, and they will have to if they want to win another championship.
Yeah, I don't know what he's going to do, Huss. But I think we all know that whatever he does is probably going to be the exact perfect thing to do to that locker room, right? Like, and a few years ago, 3-4 years ago, maybe there'd be, people would know, we'd be speculating, all that sort of thing. But he's got that locker room down to such a fantastically fine-tuned machine from a cultural perspective, from a perspective in general, right? Of just the way that so many teams like to approach things week to week, all those sorts of things. They say the right things, but in practice, you don't know if they actually put them into play like that. But boy, the way that these guys are dialed into the coaching leadership that exists with this team, Huss, dang well that they're going to hit the nail on the head with getting ready.
Well, I cannot wait for this game coming up on Saturday. Certainly will be the marquee game in the Canadian Football League this week. It'll be must-see for any fan of the CFL, with the undefeated Lions and undefeated Bombers going head-to-head out on the West Coast. We knew it was going to be a wild offseason for the Winnipeg Jets. We had to wait a little while, but the team finally has their head coach. I mean, you knew that they went as far as they could with Barry Trotz. It didn't happen. What do you think about Bones coming back to the peg? Rick Bowness, the new head coach.
I think the way I feel is probably shared by the majority of Jets fans, where it's kind of like, I know he's a super nice guy, comes across really well. He's incredibly well respected and things of that nature. Barry Trotz would have been something there would have been like a seismic shift in excitement, I think, for the Jets if Barry Trotz was going to be landing here. With Bowness, Huss, I think there's just kind of I wonder, can he really change the culture and to the degree that needs to happen here? And, what level of fundamental change is going to happen with what people have viewed on the ice and been greatly disappointed in over the last couple of years. So to me, it's something that falls a little bit flat from an excitement and sinking its talons into me. And I still actually need a little bit of time to mourn the fact that Trotz actually isn't going to come here, Huss.
Yeah, you're not the only one. We all had to take a little bit of time after that. It's great for the show, though. And listen, Barry will get back in. And I think a lot of people thought that maybe this was, a placeholder, if you will, for Barry Trotz. But I think it's pretty clear that, Bowness comes here, obviously with a great resume, incredible experience, and, tasked with turning a team around on the ice. But we mentioned about the culture change of this club. I mean, I certainly think Bones will have a part in it. But to me, I think the biggest steward of that culture change is going to be Kevin Cheveldayoff with player moves. And quite interesting to hear the captain's named Blake Wheeler out on the trade bait board right now and seemingly willing to go somewhere else. I mean, easier said than done at that age with that contract. Yeah. And we'll see what that deal looks like. But what do you think the Winnipeg Jets look like and that locker room does changes without Wheeler in the mix?
Yeah, brother. And that's sort of the $1 million question, right? And I don't know how it's similar or what you're saying there with a contract that chunky and his age. I don't know if that ultimately happens. And that's not what I want to have happen. To me, if you want to change things here, then I think you got to look at 55. If that happens, then I'm going to go, that's going to catch my attention. And I'm going to think, hey, there can be a culture shift here in Winnipeg that needs to happen where you're skating in both directions with the same level of intensity. That's what I need to see happen here as quickly as possible to the combined efforts of Cheveldayoff and Bowness. And like the Wheeler thing, maybe they can somehow get rid of that contract, right? And everybody on the planet Earth, but for a small, tiny percentage, knew dang well the back end of that contract was going to end like this sort of thing. But it's more so number 55, Huss. I think he's got to be shipped out for the change to take effect that needs to happen here.
Well, and it's funny. I mean, I certainly kind of thought that was going to be the case at the end of the season. And, we heard Dreger at one point reporting you can't see a scenario that Scheifele's back. We're hearing a very different tune right now. And I'm not sure how much that's tied into the uncertainty of Pierre-Luc Dubois' future here. But it does seem like they're coming back. Let me ask you this. Well, what do you make of Mark Scheifele's situation if he's coming back to the Jets dressing room with a new head coach and without his longtime running mate, the guy that basically had the keys to the room from Paul Maurice before in Blake Wheeler?
Well, I've really wondered at this point in time, are those two guys as tight and of one sort of hockey soul as they were maybe 3-4 years ago?
That's a great question. It didn't seem that way at the end of the season.
I agree, man. So I really wonder about, and I don't know how it could be. If you were Blake Wheeler and as whatever struggle that he might have endured or wherever his level of play is at his age, nobody questions what he's given you. nobody. And so I don't know how a veteran of Blake Wheeler's age and what he gives night in, night out, I don't know how long you could endure reaching out to the younger kids saying, hey, man, like, come on, you've got to be equally invested in both directions. I would think that would cause trouble in a relationship at some point in time. So I don't know, like, I'm not buying that whole those two guys are sort of joined at the hip thing anymore, man. I don't see how that can still be the case.
Well, and I mean, I think it's a great point, because certainly at the end of the season, when Scheif was essentially checked out and then missed the final games, I mean, we saw Blake Wheeler, I think, kind of have some fun again, playing with Paul Stastny and playing with Nikolai Ehlers. And I'll say this, I mean, to your point, I mean, no one will ever question the effort of Blake Wheeler. I mean, I think there's probably, his role as captain, I mean, maybe the way he dealt with some players and certainly the media, I mean, there was some room for improvement, shall we say. But I don't think that just simply moving Blake Wheeler in his contract, I mean, first of all, I think you're going to miss some production from him. And we can talk about how much he's making at the age. He still has done a lot of things for the Winnipeg Jets. But I don't, that alone, I don't think just immediately solves the Winnipeg Jets problem and all of a sudden everything's happy-go-lucky. I mean, certainly the coach is going to have a part of that. But, if Scheifele is back with this club, I mean, all eyes are going to be on him more than ever before as to how he responds. And you know what? I think that's from the fans, but I think it's from his teammates as well.
I agree 100%. It's almost to me like moving Wheeler would be a cosmetic sort of a thing. And moving Scheifele, now you're talking about changing the DNA of the team, and I just don't know. You can, I know, and he's obviously wickedly talented, offensively gifted, all those sorts of things, but there's just a certain level of something there that it just doesn't seem right. And I think the fans of Winnipeg, it'd be neat to see. I'm not aware of a survey of what percentage of individuals would like to see that level of change and shift. The one thing for sure, man, the level of disappointment over the last X number of years, a change in coach and just sort of where the temperature is for Jets fans. I have so many people that I know that are affluent and have had season tickets, love hockey, love the Jets, are just sort of very just in a place where they're almost uncaring. Like something fairly dramatic, I think, needs to happen. And there needs to be a seismic shift with this team, man. And I think all of that falls on making a difficult decision, but a very important one with 55. And to me, it's not bringing him back.
Well, and it'll be interesting to see how this goes. I mean, from everything we're hearing right now, it sounds like he will be back. And I mean, that will be a huge part of the job that Rick Bowness is going to have to do to bring this team together. And I think also, to your point about, some of the view of fans again on people, I mean, this team didn't seem like it was having a lot of fun at any point last season, to be perfectly honest. And people like to cheer and get behind teams, like even if they're not winning every game. I mean, a team that works hard, that has the personalities that come out of them. And, I think that is something that hopefully Rick Bowness can have a significant change in, because it was a pretty lifeless group at a time right now. And it certainly didn't inspire very much passion from a fan base over the course of last season.
And it's interesting how we can hope that with Bowness. With Trotz, we knew damn well that change would have happened, right? Knew damn well. If Barry Trotz shows up here, this team is different, man. Right across. So let's hope that Bowness can achieve something along those lines.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Troy Westwood is with us. Westy, a big week coming up. Just quick call on this Bomber game. I mean, this is a real tough spot when the team's heading out to BC. You think they get to 5-0 right now? I mean, this is an ultimate test for a British Columbia team that, probably wants to test themselves against the cream of the crop in the league, and that'll be the visitors on Saturday.
It was really cool to see Rourke struggle a little bit, right, with those 2 picks and still do enough to get the job done. So that's a team that's rolling downhill right now for sure, the Lions. There's no way in the world I'm picking the Bombers to lose, though. But, hey, going into Toronto, a place that's tough to win for this club, for decades, kind of the same thing out in BC, right? And just the bright lights, big city sort of thing. Hopefully this defense could cause some confusion for the youngster and the offense can start to gain a little bit more traction. But this day and age, you just can't bet against the Bombers ever. The Bombers will squeak it out and continue to grow.
Westy, you're the best. Thanks for doing this. Hey, listen, it's going to be a really interesting week for on the hockey side of things. Potential moves with the Winnipeg Jets. Obviously, the draft happening. This big game coming up. Hopefully, we can do this again soon in a week or two and get your thoughts on how things look post-draft and free agency for the hockey club. And obviously, always love your takes on the Bombers.
Always a pleasure spending time with you, brother. Take care, man.
All right, great stuff with Westy on Winnipeg Sports Talk. And again, folks, great numbers in here. Again, if you're new to the channel, make sure to hit that red subscribe button and join us on the reg, 1 p.m. Central, Monday to Friday. And if you can, hit that thumbs up as well. Helps us spread the channel. All right, we got to get to the Coolbet lines. Hopefully, we can have some winners for the track tonight with the Assiniboia Downs. But definitely want to shout out our friends at Nick and Nikki DQ. Nick had a big birthday on the weekend. And when you're talking birthdays, what goes better with anyone's birthday than a DQ ice cream cake? Hit them up on Instagram at DQ Manitoba, and they'll get it customized for you, ready to pick up at any of the 4 Nick and Nikki DQs. And while you're picking up that cake, you can get it on one of those delicious blizzards, ice cream treats, or, man, try those new stack burgers, which are phenomenal. 4 locations in Winnipeg and Southern Manitoba, DQ Niverville, DQ Northgate, DQ Polo Park, and DQ St. Anne's. Big thanks to our friends at Nick and Nikki DQ. And hey, we mentioned that the Bombers are back, not this weekend, but the following Friday. Be a great night to have a few Canadian Club and Gingers. Of course, the new drink of the summer, ready to drink, pre-mixed Canadian Club and Ginger Ale, available along with all the Canadian Club and Beam products at the Bomber games, as Canadian Club is the official sponsor and the official spirit of the blue and gold. And if you can't wait until the game, pop by your local beer store, grab a 6-pack of CC and Ginger. And of course, all Canadian Club products are available at your local Manitoba liquor marts. All right, we got to get to our Assiniboia Downs picks. Geez, I guess, Remo, a week today, big Tuesday night on the 12th, we'll be hosting all of our winners from the Pick 6 contest. Really looking forward to getting out to the track, and mostly looking forward to getting back to that incredible prime rib buffet.
Yeah, that's going to be a blast getting to the track. Maybe it'll be better luck for my picks if I make them while I'm there and able to watch the horse and cheer it on, because I have been ice cold with the picks, except when we did that contest. I was hitting winners. I would have won that contest if I was eligible to enter. So I'm going to feel good about being there. I did get 2 right during the contest period. So I'll try to get back at it this evening.
Good stuff. Well, let's get to the picks. I've got mine ready to go. We're going to start off for tonight, of course, post time, 7:30 p.m. at Assiniboia Downs. And if you are ever thinking about maybe getting into that terrace dining room for all the incredible food off the menu or the world-class prime rib buffet, you can get more information at asdowns.com or call to make a reservation. Race 2, I'm going to go with my $1 triactor box. It's a $6 bet. We're taking 3 Steely Caper, 4 Spicy Wit, and number 6 Swipe Left. Moving on to race number 3. I'm going to take, this is a little chalky, but we're going to go 5 and 6, Anchor Up in Benroy on a $4 Quinella bet. Moving on to race 4, we're just going to pick a winner. $4 on Witt's Cocoa. I'm always a sucker for the Witt horses, but they've done me well in the past. So we're going $4 on Witt's Cocoa to win. And then the final $6 bet will be from race 5. Another $6 or $1 triactor box, I guess. Any order. Number 1, Mass Mischief. Number 4, Midnight Salute. And number 5, or is that right? Number 6, I believe, Strider's Ring is the number. So we'll get that in, make it happen, and hopefully, I only had 1 winner last night on one of the show bets, so I certainly need to do better. Remo, I know you're in a bit of a slump. How are you breaking the slump tonight? Where are you going?
Big slump. Mitch from AZ Mitch. What is he in Twitter? Mitch Winnipeg Hockey Talk, I believe.
Yeah.
He DM'd me, said go with the Quinellas, and he just won our Showdown DraftKings last night, so I'll go with him.
Nicely done, Mitch.
Yeah, I got second, so I was doing okay. I was very happy actually that they missed the field goal because there was no more points, and I won a lot of my DraftKings for the week, so it was good. But race 3, Benroy to win. I believe you had Benroy in one of yours, so I like Benroy. Race 4. I have a 3-4 Quinella, Witt's Cocoa L Chairman. So again, we're both on Witt's Cocoa. And these are all Quinellas, so 1, 2 in any order. Race 6, I am on Mass Mischief. I believe you had Mass Mischief as well, and House Limit. And then the last one, race 7, 3, 9. I think you had one of these two. Wake Up Call. Oh no, you weren't on this. Mr. Dazzle, I've won on before. I like Mr. Dazzle. So Wake Up Call. So I'm trying to get like a favorite and like a long shot in a Quinella here. Try to get some winners.
Nicely done. Yeah, by the way, that race 5 pick for me was 1 Big Stretch, 4 Dixie Mo, and 5 Wits 10-10. Of course, get out to the track tonight. Should be a great night. Live racing tonight and tomorrow. And then, of course, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday next week. And we're looking forward to hosting all of the winners from the Pick 6 contest next Tuesday. So we'll see you there at Assiniboia Downs. All right, let's get to the Coolbet lines. And we've got CFL lines for the upcoming week. There's just 3 games on the docket. Calgary Stampeders at the Edmonton Elks. The Stamps are 3.5-point favorites on the road. Elks a home dog after that big first win of the season against the Hamilton Tiger Cats. The Ottawa Redblacks getting 6.5 points as an underdog on the road to take on the 3-1 Saskatchewan Roughriders. And this game was 1.5 earlier. It's now 2. The British Columbia Lions, favorites. I can't remember the last time the Bombers were an underdog. They will be an underdog on Saturday night, coming off that 1-point win yesterday against the Argos. Bombers, 2-point underdogs, and plus 120 on the money line. I cannot wait for this game. I know there's a lot of excitement about everything that's happening hockey over the course of this week. It can't get to Saturday soon enough to see what happens when the Bombers go up against Nathan Rourke and the BC Lions, who have been really the story of the CFL season so far.
Time zones, it's going to be tough for Bombers here.
Trigger warning, time zones.
Going from Toronto to Winnipeg to BC, playing a short week. I think it's stocked against them. I don't mind them being underdogs. The Saskatchewan-Ottawa line, very interesting. I looked earlier today. I think it was 4.5. And I thought about taking Ottawa 6.5. I heard Ottawa opened some places like 9 or 10 points. I think they are way better than their record. Yeah,
I'm taking Ottawa.
Some other books, but I think I'm gonna lay something on Ottawa here, 6.5. They just played BC and lost in overtime. So I like Ottawa. I don't think Saskatchewan is that great, although they do have real home field advantage there.
No doubt about it. Wimbledon, we've got Rafael Nadal going up against Taylor Fritz in one of the quarters, and Nick Kyrgios, a big favorite. Actually, he's had a great tournament so far, minus 385 against Guerin. And Djokovic, after his epic comeback today, down 2-0 against Jannik Sinner of Italy, comes back and runs the table. He's a massive favorite in the semis. And as far as to win the tournament outright, Djokovic now minus 357 to win. Nadal plus 425, and bad boy Nick Kyrgios 9-1. You can also get on the Scottish Open odds as well at Coolbet. Excuse me. And tomorrow, noon our time, before Winnipeg Sports Talk, join myself and Dustin Nielsen for an episode of The Lock Shop. We'll hit the Canadian Football League, the NHL Draft. There's some props up there for that. Actually, speaking of which, let's see if those lines have moved at all. Right now, still, Shane Wright, minus 303 to be the first overall pick. Yuri Slafkovsky, plus 175. And Logan Cooley, our guy Chris Peters' pick, is at 20-1. Connor Geeky's draft position is over under 13. And I believe Matt Savoy's, the other player from the Ice expected to go early in the draft, his over under is 8.5. So we'll fire up all of that tomorrow. And, of course, if you haven't played at Coolbet before, use the promo code WST. Get a 100% bonus up to $200 on your first deposit. Hey, Remo, before we finish up, some pretty big news today in the National Hockey. Listen, not a huge one out of Denver. Andrew Cogliano's back on a 1-year, $1.25 million deal with the champion Avalanche. But a couple significant hires. Haley Wickenheiser joining the Toronto Maple Leafs as their assistant general manager, was already working in the organization. Tell you what, considering what's happened with Hockey Canada, I would have personally loved to have seen Haley maybe be a leader going forward with the national governing body of the sport. They certainly seem like they need some change, but that's a great ad. And the first black general manager in the history of the National Hockey League is in San Jose. Former NHLer Mike Greer gets the job to lead the Sharks back to the promised land out of a couple really miserable seasons in the Shark Tank.
Yeah, that is. I was pumped for Mike Greer. Huge fan of him as a player with the Oilers and the Sabres. He's been a scout, an assistant coach, advisor in hockey operations. So, very nice to see Mike Greer get an opportunity as GM. They have to bring in a coach because they fired Bob Bugner over the weekend. If you thought the Jets, were late on getting a coach, well, the Sharks don't have one either. We'll wait and see what happens there. And we do have I'm wearing the Coachella Valley Firebirds hat today, and they made it a hire as well. Jessica Campbell, a female behind the bench as assistant GM. Dan Balsamo was recently hired as the head coach.
Assistant coach, isn't it?
Sorry, assistant coach. Yeah, assistant coach. Yes, the assistant GM would be behind the desk, not behind the bench.
Well, the diversity of the league certainly getting better. Great to see some women getting some opportunities. And obviously, listen, Mike Greer was a great player in the National Hockey League, was around for a long time. I'll be really interested to see what he does. Obviously, wish him well. Hey, do we want to get to the text etiquette question coming out of yesterday's press conference with Rick Bowness? Have people been talking about that in the chat today?
I think text etiquette has really come up in Winnipeg over the last couple days. There's some people in chat that are like, how are you guys even talking about this? Why is this a thing? But I think just the way that he stumbled through the answer, saying that he called and got a text back. And again,
I didn't think he stumbled. I mean, I think he was just pretty matter-of-fact about it. Yeah, I called him, left a message, got a text back. Maybe we'll talk to him at some point.
Yeah, I think maybe I don't know what you don't know what the circumstances were, so it's really hard to come to any conclusion. But however, I would say if someone called me, I would probably call them back unless I really didn't have access to a phone, like I was in. Where were you last week? Dauphin, where they didn't have cell service.
Yeah,
or
they had cell service
in the
Dauphin.
bush.
Clear Lake was a bit of an issue when we were on the golf course.
So I think it's just interesting, and that's what you can say. And maybe it was nothing. I'm sure Blake will address it later and laugh it off and say,
if that happens, I mean, I think, to be honest, I think most people's take was that Wheeler, especially with everything that we've heard reported, may already have 1 foot, if not both feet, out the door in Winnipeg, and not a conversation that needs to happen.
I will say, so here we got it. The takes are flying in from chat. Waiter says Wheeler could be on vacation. Mesa Stormy, if you can text, you can call. And Isho Boy Bruce says, when the coach calls, you answer or call back. So I don't think I ever really got calls from the boss when I remember like being on my honeymoon or whatever on vacation and answering calls, but it'd always be annoying. But I think I would get emails and do it. So,
listen, new head coach coming in, probably a good idea to have a one-on-one with the bottom line is, I will say this. I think what he had to say about the conversation with Scheifele gives some people some optimism that if Mark's going to be here, he'll be buying in and can be part of the solution going forward. I think that's probably quite different the way most people felt at the end of the season with the way that he played, and especially what he had to say at the end of the year.
Well, I think that was the surprising part where he was able to get a hold of Mark and talk to him, and then Blake was the text. There were people wondering if it was a text where he actually wrote it into the keyboard, or it was one of those auto replies that when you go to decline a call and it gives you an option of what to use.
Sorry, I can't talk right now.
Yeah, do you think he just did one of those?
I'll have to do some more digging.
That's why it's so much fun to talk about. It's like a Larry David episode, like a Seinfeld thing, like text etiquette. He called and you texted him back. You were supposed to call back. What are you thinking? So it's I think it's a whole like Seinfeld 2022 thing. I mean, whether or not you not judging a guy's character, but just the idea. I think everyone can relate to getting a phone call, whether you call or text back.
Well, from the new boss, I would be calling, but who knows? Maybe they've had a great chat already, and we just don't know about it. Bottom line is, we're hoping to have Rick Bowness join us some point next week after things settle down, coming out of the draft. But certainly, we'll have much more to talk about it tomorrow on the program. Who do we have tomorrow? We've got Mike McIntyre, Grant McKegg on the draft as well. Then, of course, Thursday, Billick's going to jump on with us. Brandon Rowicki, a little more on the draft, and Friday will be a great show. Ken Wiebe will join us from Montreal. we'll kind of recap what the Jets did in round 1. And Shane Malloy's going to jump on as well. And he'll give us a rundown of the picks that he liked the most, the ones that maybe were a bit of head scratchers, and some early draft grades for what the Winnipeg Jets did with presumably using both of their picks in the first round at 14 and 30.
I'm just laughing at the chance. Dan, the Jets fan, agrees with me, and Ishaboy Bruce's very curb moment. It's just like, I mean, I totally get that. He probably on vacation, maybe not able to talk. I mean, there's been times, but it's just funny. Just the situation is like, well, I called him and he kind of mumbles, text me back. So we'll get in touch. I mean, he's the captain of the team.
Oh, man. Shout out to everyone in chat. It's your boy Bruce. Great show today. WST is rolling into the week. We certainly are. Big week still to come, though. First round of the draft on Thursday. We'll have plenty of draft coverage heading in as well as on Friday. And then, of course, next week, we don't have a lot of time before we get to unrestricted free agency and some really interesting names on the board. Whether the Jets will be in the mix, we will see, but we'll be all over it for the next few weeks. And of course, we can't forget about that big Bomber game on Saturday night against the British Columbia Lions. 4-0 Winnipeg, 3-0 BC. It is the game of the week in the Canadian Football League. Hey, great show today. Thanks to everyone that's come out. Hit that red subscribe button if you haven't already. Tell a friend about Winnipeg Sports Talk. And if you're listening to the podcast and you ever have the option of going on to Apple or Spotify, give us a 5-star rating and a little review. Certainly appreciate that. It really does help us spread the channel as well. Thanks to Rennie, Sean Reynolds. By the way, we'll be doing a raid. We'll send you guys right over to Kenny and Rennie right now if you just stay with us on YouTube. Of course, Murat as well, and the one and only Troy Westwood. Thanks to all the sponsors that make this program happen every day. And most of all, thanks to you for hanging out with us. We'll see you tomorrow at 1 p.m. We're going to head you over to KNR right now. Thanks for being with us today on Winnipeg Sports Talk.
Oh, my God. Oh! Shut it down. Let's go home.
Thanks for tuning in to Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast feed at winnipegsportstalk.com.